This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. No guest for this one. It's just me and Monty. So, oh well, I guess since I'm irrelevant and he never knew anything about League of Legends, this will only get 50 to 60,000 views on a show that's been around for 9 years. You know something, Monty? I'm even going to start this episode with a little mini rant. There's two things that have been really rewarding about some of the interviews I've done recently. One, and I'm not going to call out a certain former host I had who constantly berated me that this isn't how teams work. There's no such thing as shot callers. Teams are 5 players all making equally good calls, and then it just so happens that every team we're then rated in is a genius team on the map. It just so happens that every team with Mithy in understands Korean League of Legends the way the Westerners do. It just so happens that every team with Afromu, the ADC gets really good, and then he shot calls. No, none of them are shot callers, right? Spoiler, watch my content soon, and you will see I was right on them all. But Monty was right too, and here's why. Because do you know what? There are 2 scenarios that are mental. Because I keep getting told, I was told at the time by bozos like Reginald, who literally to this day think League of Legends is fight at dragon into a 5v5. That's what they think League of Legends has always been. Meanwhile, by the way, they had Bjergsen, a player who probably could have been one of the best split push players ever if he'd been actually unleashed in Europe. So already I know these guys were like, Monty knows nothing. He is just looking at Koreans, right? 2 things. One, Monty literally wrote an article explaining wave management concepts in spring 2013. There are teams playing now in LEC and LCS who don't know what wave management is. There are top players who don't know what a wave is. Then also, there was that whole thing where you'll just have to wait and see. But do you remember that whole thing about how Link wrote that 17-page document? Like, all Monty did was make a Civ comp, like, just press R. No, it was just press R, and we take all the towers while they take Baron, and we win the game. And also, literally, you're going to find out soon, Monty is the reason why the best leader CLG ever had even became a leader, and he credits it all to Monty. Then there's the last detail. I didn't
know that.
You'll say who. I just released a Svenskeren Reflections interview in which I ask that question. Are you ready? You're going to like this, Monty. I say that story. Do you remember when Monty says he secretly coached you guys in SK Gaming? This is going to blow your mind, fans. Svenskeren himself admits he was just a young, stupid kid and he didn't know what Monty was talking about or really who Monty was. And that Monty came up to him at the boot camp for Season 4 Worlds and explained to him there's a concept called vertical jungling that if you do, you can just win the game. But all the players, including Svenskeren, were like, I don't really know what the fuck he's talking about. So they ignored it. That is the strategy that Samsung White won Worlds with and revolutionized League of Legends for the next 3 years. And Monty knew it already and was trying, literally just giving pearls to these sows, but they were too busy oinking and eating shit from the trough to even listen. So the idea Monty knows nothing, you know nothing. You're telling on yourself there. You're telling on yourself.
I didn't expect an impassioned defense with a bunch of evidence. I have to say. It's interesting actually going back to that time because the reason why I knew this was because of that CLG boot camp where I had watched a bunch of scrims because we scrimmed Samsung White and Samsung Blue. And I was, so we had like, we would record those scrims. And not only were we seeing this in Champions and Masters that year, but because we actually had a lot of scrim games, it was very interesting to be able to experiment against them and have them experimenting against us and see how they were beating CLG, a team that I knew very well, right? So I learned a lot, actually, from that I ended up, discussing a little bit at that SK bootcamp.
I just thought you deserve your flowers every now and then, mate. Everyone does. Just you're never going to get it from the shitheads on Reddit.
Remember when I went to Overwatch, I just forgot everything I ever knew about League of Legends. Yeah. They Men in Black like flashed me, and it just deleted it from my brain.
And by the way, that thing where I just knew who all the shot callers and all the geniuses and all the tactical minds are, it's almost like on camera I talk to these people and get info, and sometimes I just don't turn the camera on. Crazy, I know. Crazy concept, I know. Wild, innit? Imagine that.
People just lack object permanence, Thorin. If you're not on their screen, you can't be doing anything else at any other point in time.
They don't know that's a massive sign of immaturity, that no one else could ever know what except anything that you don't know. In fact, you aren't even aware that there's things that you don't know because you don't know them. That's actually one of the worst tautology of an idiot you can ever find. So, right, anyway, obviously, here's the thing, Monty. It's a hot day. It's actually really hot day over here, just because remember we don't have air conditioning. All I will say, you know that stupid thing going around online, like, lol, Europeans haven't figured out air conditioning. No, it's just hot like this for like 3 weeks of the year, you cretin. Why would we install a device that costs hundreds of euros and then run fucking electricity through it? Think about it. You just fucking open the window and you live with it, don't you? Like, so all I'll say is this. There's a detail a lot of people won't know. It's based as fuck, but you can go look, medically provable, and experience will tell you as much. You know when people say just drink water? No, that's not even how your body works with water. Your body is an electrical device on some level. That's how the cells communicate. That's how the nerves work, etc. And basically, the electrical aspect, if you don't know, like crystals and these concepts are literally how like watches work, for example. The piezoelectricity is like a massive phenomenon in the world. So what happens is your body doesn't just run on water. It runs on the balance between water and salts and electrolytes. So that's why if you only drink loads of tap water, you can actually dehydrate yourself, if people don't know that. Sometimes if you're gassed and you're playing a sport and you just drink loads of fresh water, you'll actually feel like you feel sick in your stomach. You might feel bloated. So I have to say, people are going to think this is a troll. I am actually drinking a liquid IV now because I've just done like a 2-hour League of Legends show. I was out in the sun, and if I just drink 3 hours worth of water like that, I go past the point where it's helping me. It starts just to wreck me. Actually, at that point in time, like all you're doing is piss like a racehorse. You're actually feeling dehydrated from that. Like what? The more I drink, because if you don't know, because of the balance, you're actually giving out minerals out of your body at that point in time. It's to do with like osmosis and how much can go through the cell barrier and all that shit. So that's one of the reasons why I actually, during these shows, you might say I often do actually drink a liquid IV, because in between, if you have to talk a lot, you drink loads of water. And so I find actually it balances me out well.
Yeah, and especially if you're outside a lot in the summer, whether you're working outside, going to the pool, going to these summer festivals and concerts, or if you're dehydrated from being hungover, guys, a lot of people swear by liquid IV in that regard as well. So it comes in 12 flavors, and as you guys know, it's great. I've been using it in my own workouts, take it to my gym.
It hydrates 3 times faster than water.
It does. Yep. And it has a bunch of vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, 3 times the electrolytes of leading sports drinks. You can get it in bulk nationwide in the US at Costco, or, and here's the key, guys, and this is a great way to support us. The best way to support us is by, if you want something from one of our sponsors, it's the best way to support us. 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code LFN at checkout. 20% off anything on their site. They've got caffeinated versions, the energy multiplier. That's what I use for working out. Okay. They have a new kombucha. They've got tons of different products, guys. So it's been really great having them as a sponsor. Now is a great time to go pick it up if you haven't already.
Code LFN, obviously.
Yep, code LFN, 20% off.
This is where, though, I'm different from Monty. Monty was like very egalitarian with that. I don't actually care if you buy it anywhere without the code. Like I saw people put messages like, I couldn't actually get it shipped to where I am, but I bought some from a shop. It's like, that doesn't help me. If you didn't put a code, spoiler, that didn't help me. So it's all well and good, but if you're in America, just use the fucking code on the checkout, and then you help us, and you get 20% off, and you get the product. We all win, don't we? We all win.
Yep,
what we're talking about.
Stuff.
What's happening?
So do you want to talk about the start of the LCS? We do have to put the capstone on our LCS player walkout project, which took 3 episodes with 3 different guests, because now, Thorin, we've seen the aftermath, which is collapsing viewership of the LCS.
Viewership. If people don't know, I think LEC just had like 250 or something like that. Some 200K is what they're at. Like, I actually bet if I go and look, I haven't looked, but I'm going to guess like LFL's probably has the same as fucking LCS now, Monty. It has to, surely. You know what I mean? Like, this is so bad. This is why I made that point. They couldn't have picked a worse time to do this. They picked a time when their stock was at the lowest possible, and then they fucking threatened the league like this. And also, by the way, it's bad enough that fans didn't watch Academy and they wanted it around. How are we going to justify the salaries in LCS if it's 40K viewership? We can't. It's over if that's the case. It's actually over.
Yeah, I mean, it's really quite.
Future is the for 40K viewership. That can't happen, mate.
Yeah, it's really quite bad. So, and I think a lot of it was, at least on the initial day, that people didn't know that LCS was going on because of the walkout. It started on a Wednesday, which I guess
then. Yeah, thanks for not making it the original start of the season when we were all waiting. Cheers, guys. You did that.
So they didn't know when the walkout was going to end. A lot of people responded to me on Twitter saying that they were surprised to see that LCS was on. Part of that is just messaging from the league, though, and the LoL esports website, as we know, has been terrible for a long time and is basically useless in a lot of ways when it comes to understanding the matches or watching VODs on them. But LCS, out of 3 leagues, so CB, LoL, LEC, and LCS, had the lowest or had the biggest drop in viewership. And the average viewers dropped by 47% compared to the first week of the spring season. Summer is typically lower, guys. So it's better to compare summer to summer than summer to spring. But this is from ES Charts and their news article. And peak viewers decreased by 40%. So CB LoL also saw a drop by 27%. And we saw LEC drop by 17% in average viewers compared to the first week of the spring season. But again, we expect that in summer for it to be slightly lower. Now, the real issue is year over year from summer. So 77,000 peak viewers on the first match of summer. Okay, guys, this time. Last summer, it was 118,000. Summer before that was 222,000. So we are literally talking about from 2021 to 2023 on the first day, a drop of 2/3 of peak viewers. And that includes co-streamers, guys. Before you guys are like, oh, well, what about the co-streamers? That includes co-streamers. 77,000 peak, including co-streamers. I saw the main Twitch channel at like 30,000 viewers.
Dude. There's another angle people aren't thinking about. You know, when I've begged LS, I know you've done this as well, mate. I've begged him to drop LCS and told him, bro, like, you're having to take these mental health breaks. It's wearing you out. Like, at this point, if 40K is for everyone or 70K is for everyone, I doubt he's even getting that much on his core stream if he just, I mean, I know he's ill at the moment in a way, but like, how can Dom and LS justify watching the league if they're getting barely anything, you know? Everyone needs the viewership, guys. Everyone.
Well, I think for Dom, I mean, he had 8,000 viewers on his stream, so his stream is doing fine. He's just a larger percentage of the total viewership. So I think, if anything, a lot of viewers are actually just going over to co-streamers as opposed to watching the main channel at this point in time.
Problem with that is, even though I do like it, you know this, that you can't really be like, lol, fuck LCS. Like, if the mainstream doesn't get enough views, it's just over as a league. Like, there'll be no core stream at that point in time. That's the problem. So I like it for Dom, but that's to be a future for the league.
Yeah, I mean, it really isn't good. And I do think, as I said, part of it was that people didn't know it was happening. But even if you look at the entire weekend, it was not it was not a smashing success by any means.
By the way, right? Am I missing something? Why is everyone so incompetent in esports, right? If me and you, Monty, say I said to you, so today is obviously Wednesday, right? If I said to you, by Friday, we need to get a certain piece of info in front of everyone's eyes, we could easily do it in that time frame, that runway. We would do something like we do a giveaway that you have to retweet and tag 4 friends on, and you win like a subscription or something. Then we'd also do things like we'd pay for advertising on Instagram, targeted ads and Facebook. Then we'd actually pay to be in the ad roll of this. We'd get a bunch of streamers like Dom and LS, and we'd say, want you to do this ad or spoken at the beginning of your these are all things that wouldn't even cost mega money. It's like, it'd maybe be like 5-10K, but you would get the massive potential viewership. You'd be like, the LCS is back, the walkout's over, it's coming. They didn't do any of that. They just sat back and were like, where is everyone? Like the John Travolta walking in like Pulp Fiction, like.
Here's the other thing they could do, Thorin, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show Riot how to do this right now. Are you ready, guys? Okay. So you understand that Last Free Nation is part of a larger network, right, of various shows. So here's how you do it. So, guys, we have a CSGO channel. If you guys are Counter-Strike fans, guess what? We released another Snake and Banter this week. There's another Hot Take Point Made coming out soon. If you guys like those shows, we're starting to release those again. So come on over. And guess what? We launched a new channel. Last Free Nation Culture on YouTube, LFN Culture on Twitter, Last Free Nation Culture on TikTok, Instagram. You guys can check those out. What's on that channel? Well, Doe and I just started our new show, Nerd Legion, where every week we're going through sci-fi and fantasy TV and films. We did Star Trek Strange New Worlds last week. This coming week, we're going to do Black Mirror Secret Invasion and the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, where we kind of joke and discuss about these shows. Lots of you have seen it already. Thanks for all the subscribers over there. But head on over to Last Free Nation Culture and check out our first non-esports content and support that if you guys want to see more of it. It's already out for your viewing pleasure. So drop a comment, like, subscribe, everything like that. So you see what I just did there, Thorin. Now remember that LCK and LPL were running, and they didn't use LCK and LPL to announce any changes about LCS.
They're not even trying. It's like I say, they just aren't trying. The problem with Riot has always been, this is something we didn't address during the LCS walkout thing, actually, to be fair, Monty. Richard always says about the team owners, and I agree, because they can only understand esports through the model of the NFL, essentially. But Riot's even worse. Riot has played their game on easy mode forever, and then when times get hard, they're like, what? I have to like do something and be innovative and actually push the back. Yeah, it's not fucking 2012 anymore, dickhead. You don't have 10 times more viewer than every other game. You don't have it like that. So actually, yeah, you've got to actually be creative. You've got to have a street team that hits the bricks and starts telling people about stuff and gets a buzz going. I'd have even been doing a thing, no joke. I might even have done this, Monty, just because it's a classic thing you do to swag. I might have done that thing where you take out like a massive thing in fucking Times Square where it's like, LCS is back, the walkout's over, check out Doublelift and all your favorites. I might even do that just for like, the gesture of showing like, hey, fucking esports, but I might even do that. Like, why not I celebrate it? That could be cool, right? We reached an agreement. I mean, the agreement was just shut the fuck up and play. But yeah, we reached the agreement, shut up and dribble, bitch, basically. Yeah, they did. And indeed they did. Indeed they did dribble. In this case, they dribbled a bit more than they played League of Legends, if you get my meaning. Because, mate, I'll tell you right now, I don't know how much of LEC you've watched. The West has never been worse at League of Legends since about season 4, mate. This is really dire. LEC is dog shit. It is like G2 is just on easy mode, and even they threw away a game with that stupid Nico thing where they were just trying to do some troll shit. And LCS is fucking terrible, mate. These games, forget flip a coin. It's more like just fucking throw a bunch of shit on the floor and then just pick up one thing. All right, that you win. There was everyone was loving it. I saw everyone Reddit was like reveling in all the upsets. Like, do you know how bad it is for the league when big rosters completely fail? Do you know how bad it is when the whack rosters just win games inexplicably? And even worse, this is how I know on the LCS walkout thing that none of these fans do support the players, Monty. The teams that hella cynically fired coaching staff and put in assistants and side people, and then fired the biggest star players and MVPs and put in bums from academy, when they win games, you celebrate. You don't even like them. They'll never be at Worlds. You'll never watch them. If you celebrate that, you are just the Joker. You are celebrating nihilism. You are celebrating the death of society. There's nothing cool about that. They didn't win because they're awesome. They win because like massive $1 million teams are failing right now. That's terrible for everyone in the league. This is why I say keep that energy if you pretend you're about the LCS and the health of the ecosystem and you support NA. You don't. You're just preying on everyone's downfall. Because this was a really hard week to watch of LCS, Monty. I kept watching games like this looks like it should be a banger. How many bangers were there? Where are the bangers? I'm like a fucking British guy waiting for fucking his mash and gravy, Anna. Where are the bangers? Where are the bangers? That's all right, but where's the main course?
The pub kitchen's backed up, Duncan. I think that the teams were underprepared coming into this week overall when it comes to the LCS. I don't think that these records are going to stand. FlyQuest was obviously shockingly bad, and which is weird
everyone
because
really believes the Vulcan takes bad, it can't work, they're all shit. Like, guess what? You know what? I'll double down. Can I have more of that stock? But you're selling your stock. I'll take it right now. I'll see you in 6 weeks.
Which is weird because everyone that I've talked to has said that FlyQuest is just dominating scrims.
Right.
The scrim bucks are enormous on FlyQuest right now. And that, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why Vikla is playing so badly. He is currently #1 in NA solo queue with a 60% win rate. Like, surely you can't reach that if you have garbage laning, and yet his laning has been garbage within the LCS. So I don't know if this is a nerves issue. You wouldn't think so. He's not a rookie, guys. He played last year on KT, right? He's not unaccustomed to stage games. If it's maybe their comms are changing during the games, that is causing some of the issues that they have. But they've also found a variety of different ways to get beaten, from just different lanes randomly losing to missing skill shots to different players running it down.
The Vikla one where he just died at like whatever it was, level 3 against the Azir. There's no way he actually thinks that's good. It was just inexplicable. It was a brain fart or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was really bad. It was really bad. I mean, think about Prince and Vulcan getting absolutely clapped in lane by Doublelift in the first game of the season, and then when they tried to make a play topside, they miss skill shots and then die up there. So they die on both sides of the map at the same time. It's awful. It's just awful. And FlyQuest, I think they will turn it around. They should still be the favorite, in my opinion, for the league, despite the fact that Vicla's play has been pretty rocky for some time. This group of players, if as long as they can make it into playoffs, which remember they only have to make top 8, so it's not that big of a deal, should be able to at least get it together for playoffs. We know what playoff impact looks like. I'm not sure what's going on. I also just have faith in Song as a coach to fix some of these issues, but it was rough to watch this team. Against TSM, they kind of just bled out slowly on the map. But we are seeing a lot of passive play again in LCS. Credit to Cloud9, who continues to be aggressive, too aggressive at times, you have to say. And Team Liquid, they're riding an informed Summit and a surprisingly good Pyosik, which we know can't last because with Pyosik, him being good never lasts. I've been watching Pyosik for years, guys, and he's streaky. Sometimes he'll go on a tear for half a split where he has some really good games. Before last year, he was oftentimes the best player on his team. His team was garbage, but he was the one who was carrying. And for whatever reason, when Pyosik has a bad team, he plays better. And when he has a better team, he plays worse. That's kind of been the Pyosik way of things. And right now, I just don't believe the Team Liquid's going to be able to persevere when they still have Harry and Yun at key carry positions. Even though mid lane is garbage within the LCS right now, surely this can't last for TL.
No way. I'll take both sides. So TL's 3-0. I'm telling you right now, are you ready? Mark this, because this will be a short, this will be a YouTube click, it'll be a TikTok, but it'll be fucking glorious. So when the split ends, guys, and everyone's played 18 games, they played 3 games so far, here's my prediction. Team Liquid will be like 5th place or 6th place. There'll be a playoff team, but not a top one. They'll have lost tons of games. Meanwhile, FlyQuest is 0-3. So this is a fucking hell of a statement right now. FlyQuest will win 9 or 10 games. There's my prediction. Mark it down, put it there, think it's a fluke, deny it, run from it, believe whatever you want. Just see you in a few weeks. Let's see who was right and who was wrong. I'm doubling down on it completely. I even think within how shit the games were, it couldn't have gone worse. There were still moments where some players looked like they were good, quite frankly. Some players looked like Speaker had moments. It's not like Prince himself was shit the whole game. So yeah, they had issues in the bot lane at times. This can turn around. This can turn around, guys. And Team Liquid one, I just don't believe at all. I'm sorry. That looked fraudulent as fuck, mate. If you believe that can continue, God bless. God bless.
Look, I will say about some of their wins, like the one against Team Liquid, or IMT rather, they were really clean. But a lot of that is predicated on a continuance of form from Pyosik that I just don't believe in because it's never happened historically. And we have a large body of work from this player to tell us that it probably won't happen and it probably won't continue to work that way. So I think Team Liquid, it's hard to have a losing win rate when you start 3-0. So I anticipate that they probably still will be 4th, at least in the standings. Especially because, the season is so condensed over the next 6 weeks. You just it's every week is a super week at this point in time. So you're going to lose, that is going to generate some higher instability in the league in general.
There are some teams in the league too, so you can also still farm a couple of them. Yeah, you can still probably get like 9 games maybe. Yeah, you could probably do that.
But I also think that anticipating the Golden Guardians and FlyQuest are going to continue to be below 500 teams is probably a mistake. And those teams are going to rise up the standings and start to take games off of teams like Liquid and EG.
But the risk of making this Thorin and Monte versus Reddit, I'll tell you the wackest consensus. Because the reason I read Reddit, I don't read it for analysis and stuff. There's nothing there. There's just a bunch of boneheads. I read it to get a consensus of what community's thinking about. Like what do they think on topics? Which way are they going? Who are they going down on? Who are they out on? This is probably the worst take of all time, Monte. Reddit's actually, I always say Reddit is like crowdsourcing the dumbest take ever. Because if people don't know how mob behavior works, you don't rise to the level of the smartest person because that's one person. You go down to the lowest denominator of the group. You all become collectively the dumbest person in the group. And so here's what the take is on Reddit. Are you ready? This is going to age so poorly. It is insane. Mark it down. Come back in a few weeks. I want to see this comment section full of Thorin was right comments, right? Here's what the take is, Monte. That the Vulcan trade wasn't just bad. that essentially whoever got Ayla, Evil Geniuses, that was the real good move. And Ayla was the hidden Kwisatz Haderach all along, right? If you think that those two facts are going to continue, you are so smoking the old fucking peace pipe. I can't even handle it, bro. Like, Vulcan is one of the most consistently good players the LCS has ever produced with every ADC he has played with, by the way. He even was playing with a guy literally malnourished, begging to leave the game and winning games and playoff series. If you think he's not going to figure it out with the best or second best ADC in the league, you're out your mind. That's an easy double down. And then the Ayla one, look, I actually think Unforgiven's an underrated player. But even so, Ayla, it wasn't like he was a total idiot, but man, did he have some fucking bad players from a support player. Man, did he have times when he didn't know what he was doing. So if he can continue this little bit of form, look, I'd like to see players be good, but I just don't believe it yet. 1 week doesn't undo all the... In the same way as one bad week for Vulcan doesn't undo his whole career, this does not transform Ayla into some monster. Like, I've got to see a lot more than that, mate. I've got to see a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, we all saw some of like the really horrific fresh plays Ayla was making. I have a lot of kind of questions about his champion pool at the professional level. We've basically seen him kind of exclusively on enchanters for the most part, which is par for the course with the current meta. But his Thresh doesn't look good. He has had one game on Nautilus last split, and he was an emergency substitute who was never expected to, you know, like he was dealing with the emergency substitute situation of Winsome coming in because of his visa. But even after he got that visa, it wasn't up to snuff, and he wasn't the player that we expected to be able to dominate with Prince. So Vulcan is such a insane, clear upgrade for this position that I'm not sure why the synergy isn't there yet as a team. But I assume it's going to get there over time. They've just made a lot of mistakes on the map, either being too passive, or in the Golden Guardians game, FlyQuest let Licorice get massively ahead and played the macro game very poorly, and basically just let Licorice farm plates on Yone and dropped a bunch of creeps to the tower because Impact was trying to prop up the rest of the map. So they lost to what was effectively at that point in time an unstoppable split pusher. See, to get their heads screwed on straight in terms of the shot calling and not dying in lane, and I think FlyQuest will be a much improved team.
This gives us a chance to point something out about what I actually don't like about LCS. What I like about LEC is this, Monty. I understand that for sheer exposure, even for the worst team in the league, they want you to get at least 9 games in BO1s, right? So essentially, you have the 3 weeks of playing in the group stage. It's not called groups, it's called season, unfortunately. Then you go into group play where it's BO3s. That makes sense. LCS, it's actually the worst 3 format I've ever seen, Monty, because they kept the league. And you remember this when you were a coach. The worst weeks are super weeks. Every week is a super week now. Every fucking week, you play 3 teams in a BO1. If you don't know the history of League of Legends, that is by definition the biggest upset generator you can ever create. Also, even though it's only a single game, because it's over 3 different games, it's a different type of focus. And quite frankly, it's so rare teams can actually just do the 3-0, even if they're the best. Even if they're the best.
You know what's wild, Thorin? Is that if you have these 6 weeks, right, you could actually schedule a format where teams play best of 3s against each other in a single round robin. And since you only have 6 weeks, obviously you'd have 9 best of 3s to play per team. So sometimes, you know, for some of the weeks, you'd have to double up and have, say, a team play a best of 3 on Wednesday and then a best of 3 on Friday. But some weeks they'd only play 1 best of 3, say, on Thursday instead. But you could schedule this. You could completely change the format and do best of 3s and do a single round robin like they do in LPL. And at least we wouldn't be condensing it so that every week is playing against 3 different opponents. And we would see best of 3.
And it's also, you're practicing a format that's more akin to the League of Legends we want to see anyway, in playoffs, in international play. So, yeah, to me, there's no downside, mate. Like, why do I need to see you play twice, but over BO1s and separate, and then an all and super? To me, you've muddied the waters. Like, you've made it a bit silly.
I just don't understand why you would keep the same format and just super week it every week instead of being creative and trying to come up with something that was a little bit different.
I mean, the sad thing is it's the only one of the major regions that has an actual ship format now. It's the only one.
I mean, I'm not a super big fan of the LPL and LCK formats just because I don't really want to see a bunch of round robins. And I appreciate that LEC is at least eliminating some of the bad teams relatively quickly at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, LCS is clearly the worst format overall. And I don't want to see even more of that worst format every week. It makes watching the games just incredibly kind of meaningless and painful. And also just creates very weird results. I think we'll wait to do more discussions about LCS. I'm sure people want to hear about Cloud. I'll give you a quick take on Cloud9, I guess. I think that this team probably is going to be in the finals again, but they play really cocky and can throw away leads. And I think we are going to see upsets as a result where they get early game advantages, overextend, as we've seen from players like M&S and Blabber, and throw away objectives. And I still have a lot of questions about how this team could perform at the international level, even if they're dominating LCS. And I certainly don't expect any kind of undefeated season from them. I think it's so hard, especially when every week is a super week, to actually go 18-0.
Yes,
it's basically impossible.
Even though I will say this might be the weakest LCS field they've ever faced, because you've got all these stupid cut down rosters and you've got teams that are just not that good and you've got imports that are like, why are they still in LCS? So I do think the opposition's shit, but I agree. If every week's 3 BO1s on different days, no one to do 18-0, mate. You can't do it. You're going to drop one at least out just randomly. You're going to lose a Baron fight. And then also in this meta, remember, we're still in the meta where once it gets to a certain point in the game, one team wipe means the other team just pushes on the base and the game's over. That's a really extreme meta to play. If this was like season 5 meta, Monty, where it was more like StarCraft Brood War with like macro, like you take this base, but then I move back to this position. In that one, it's harder to win. In this one bad mistake is what happens in the LPL all the time. The game's just over. You just push the base in, it's over.
Yeah, the games end, like you say, extremely quickly. You can get picked off, and a Jinx reset or a Zeri reset will just clear your entire team if one person is out of position. So the level of punishment right now is really crazy. So going undefeated and having upsets are just going to be more or less, I think, par for the course as we look forward until the meta drastically changes. And we probably are not going to see that for a little bit, unfortunately, just because the static Shiv meta is pretty annoying and pretty broken as it stands right now.
Also, why is that? This is a really bad sign for NA. Why isn't that being abused in LCS by everyone? Dude, the amount of LeBlancs that didn't even build it. Like, what? Do you not have newspapers
time he could only play LeBlanc.
Do you know what I mean, bro? Like, pay attention. It's broken as shit. You can literally win with just auto attacks. It's mental.
I mean, this.
You can wave clear like a god. It's got everything you want, mate. Get it all.
This is so ridiculous. And if you guys want to see the most ridiculous iteration of this, go back and watch Dplus Kia versus Nongshim Red Force and LCK from this last week, and Showmaker doing 2 games of the static Shiv LeBlanc, and watch what happens when Showmaker has, this is hilarious, guys, he has Hex Tech Soul, so he has more Chain Lightning that slows, Static Shiv, Night Harvester, and Lichbane. And watch what he does to minion waves with Hex Tech Soul and the Static Shiv, and one auto attack with the Lichbane or the Night Harvester proccing across the entire team. It is absurd to watch this. It's game 2 that happened. I mean, the whole series is worth watching, not because it's a competitive series, but game 1 features Canyon on Nico in the jungle, and Canyon is so far the only player in a major region worldwide to play Nico jungle, and he completely smurfs this game, and he's using Nico to pretend to be Kellen's Leona a lot of the time and just slash dancing in the jungle just to mock them. And it is very, very funny. It's an utterly dominant series by Dplus Kia, but really entertaining games if you guys want to go check that out.
Along the lines of that, I talked a bit about it on Best Damn League Show, which is out now. But one of the things I find so whack is the ultimate example of Westerners being like, that's good, so I'm going to use it, but not know what the fuck they're doing is. Dude, their Nico's a dog shit compared to these Eastern European. The Eastern one, the LPL ones are unbelievable, and there's some really good ones in LCK, like you say. There's like I said with that cap split, they're just doing like stupid gimmick shit, mate. Like Dom put it the best. If you're the Nico, right, you want to constantly. It's like being Pyke. You want them to constantly think you could be about to pop up behind them. They're just on your screen all game long. You just see them walk towards. It's the same with the Annie. They walk towards you really aggressively. I wonder if he's going to flash and bear, do the fucking bear on me. Of course he is. You have to come out of a brush. You've got to fucking make this. And also, just because it is funny to be like a minion, don't actually do it in the game. That's like some silly shit you do in a charity match or something. Like, how about just dominate the game? Like you say, why not be the support and walk into lane with the ADC and then just pounce on them? That's genius.
I think what, to put it at that, the best example is obviously the G2 game where G2 mega threw because Caps wanted to be the ward.
I mean, such a stupid spot for a fucking pink ward. Nothing about it made sense. It was like a troll, like I told you. It's so dumb. They just winning so much, like, I guess. Fuck it.
They just let Broken Blade die to set up that play.
It's dumb as fuck, wasn't it? I know.
I mean, I really enjoyed it because it was clear trolling.
Oh, it was.
And they thought they were going to win, and
yeah, they thought they were so far ahead. I know exactly.
Yeah, that doesn't take away from me that G2 is still the overwhelming favorite based on the games that we've seen so far and the form that we've seen from the players to win LEC. But yeah, I think there's a pretty clear difference, and we are seeing more Nico in the LPL overall because Nico's just basically permabanned in the LCK, so we haven't actually been able to see that much of it. We've seen some from Chovy, but Nico in LCK currently has a 100% pick ban rate, and it's only been played in 4 games. It's 3-1, and it's been banned in 48 games. So 48 bans, 4 picks. Every time it's available, it's been picked. Yuumi, 51 games. It's been banned in 22 and picked in 29. So almost at 100%. Milio, very similar. However, Yuumi does actually only have a 12-17 win record, which is interesting. I know you were speaking of Yuumi. I know you were, and talking about the meta and picks overall. You were kind of mauling on Twitter over Freak's post. So one of the things I will preface this by saying, I really appreciate what Freak is doing on the balance team because I think his videos have been really good at illuminating the thought process behind the balancing, and he's very good at explaining it.
Oh, so this, by the way, from CSGO, we just get like what happened. They don't even explain why. I actually appreciate that Riot has someone who comes out and explains, here's what we're going for, here's what we're trying to, here's even what we think's a buff and a nerf. That's cool. I actually agree with him. Like, that's very positive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the changes that they've been making since Freak has been on the design team have been good. Now, one thing that you just have to understand, I can say this from knowing Freak for literally 20 years at this point in time, is that Freak is a contrarian. He loves to kind of rile people up. And unfortunately, what Freak will do is, even though he is smart, and in other contexts, he would argue against his own points if someone else was presenting them because they are kind of disingenuously plucked out of context, or they're built on a premise that doesn't make sense. And people saw this in the Rumble Jungle thing where he was trying to argue, Dom famously arguing against him when Freak said that it wasn't broken. And Dom was saying, well, just because it's being played badly doesn't mean that it's not broken. I'm very much reducing those arguments. So he came out on Reddit with some points about Yuumi and competitive play, basically poo-pooing the fact that it had reached virtually 100% pick ban status within LCK by saying like, oh, LPL is the superior region and we are seeing significantly less presence. As of right now, Yumi's pick ban presence is only at 57.7%, which means there's like 10 champions above Yuumi. And so therefore it was the Koreans who are worse players who are the ones that are overvaluing the Yuumi, which might be true to a certain degree. But it also might be true that Koreans, LCK has a better meta read right now, and so Yuumi is actually stronger. It's not that LPL has been at all times more powerful. So, for example, guys, in spring, we wouldn't have said that Hail of Blades AD carry supports are underpowered when T1 was dominating them, when T1 was clearly the best team in the world at that point in time. And it was just because they had a style of as a team and a player like Keria who was capable of playing them, and other players around the world were not really able to play to that level as a support player, right? So that's one example for you. It doesn't mean that it wasn't broken. It was just that T1 had a unique ability to exploit those champions.
The problem is Freak actually did the same shit as what I was making fun of all those Reddit fans about the walkout. Like, just pay less, bruh. Just fix the ecosystem, bruh. Just take more VC, bruh. Like, just make a salary cap, bruh. His whole thing, for real, was the best people in the world, the literal outlier in any pattern, can manage it, so just draft better. By the way, do you know why that's one of the dumbest takes for someone who knows League of Legends? Because your draft will always be better if you have better players who can play more champions and more comps together and have more experience. Like, that will always be the case. It's the same in Counter-Strike, Monty. I can tell you right now, there aren't teams who are ranked 15th in the world who have a 6-map pool out of 7, because they wouldn't be ranked 15th. The teams that have the 6-map pool are like top 3. And the point is, because you've got better players, so you can win on maps you're not good on. You've got more experienced players, so you can play on maps you're not very good at. There's a million factors. You're really good on some maps. You can practice some more. That's why it was actually for real. It was, like you say, it was just him constructing a devil's advocate argument. But what the problem he has is this. I at least wink. I let people know there's some kayfabe and it's a character. He makes people think these are all his real takes, mate, that he really is an idiot. Like, that's the part I find sad, because I've always told people this. He is not actually a fucking moron. You can tell he isn't. You can tell he knows a lot about League of Legends. He just picks these really weird, like, I mean, I don't like this vernacular, but the way, like, hill to die on, he just picks these weird spots to plant his flag. I mean, you remember the old school one was when T1 was the best. That was when he was saying China was going to win. Like, exactly the one period when they couldn't have won, you idiot. But that was when he was saying, like, China was going to be the best.
Like I said, this is just from knowing him. He has something inside of him that has to be contrarian in these positions, even when I think he would not believe himself. And to the point about better players, unfortunately, it kind of goes against the design philosophy, because Riot has stated this, right? So Riot has stated that they don't want Yumi to be a high skill champion. They want it to be a more introductory champion for people to come into the game and be able to play with their friends, right? And if that's the case, then the argument has to be like, why are we if we are seeing this champion, if you consider LCK a less skilled region, and we are seeing this champion at near 100% pick ban rate within LCK, then it has been a failure because it's too effective at its job, which is propping up lower skill players. If its job is to make players who are worse able to play the game of League of Legends, then where you don't want to see it the most is in the worst regions.
This
right?
is what you're saying, by the way, is why it is a fundamentally bad champion, Monty. Because if it was really awesome, the reason why you would pick it as the best support in the world isn't for the auto win. It's because you'd be able to do shit no one else could do with it. That is not the case. Carrier on that champion cannot do insane shit that like fucking Trimby can't do in the LEC. So the problem, like you're saying, is the champion raises the floor of your team. It doesn't actually make your team a better team at League of Legends. So there's a problem with it as a champion. Here's the thing, Monty. I don't care about champions like Yorn being really strong. That's a lot of skill expression when that's out there. You have to do a lot of cool shit. There's a lot of counterplay. You can dodge it. You can cleanse. There's a million things you can do. The Yumi, the problem with it is just too paint by numbers. And it's become, like I give the analogy always, it's become like that thing with the Infestor in StarCraft Wings of Liberty, where it's never wrong to pick, or in that case, build it. It's never wrong to pick Yumi. If you have the right couple of ADCs, it's always going to be the right pick. The joke is you can first pick it, rotation. There's never going to be wrong in the draft. Like, what's the counter?
I mean, I think that the counter is gameplay on the map, right? The counter is punishing Yumi in lane. The counter is diving Yumi, for example. There are ways that you can set the Yumi behind or punish the AD carry within the laning phase if you have good coordination as a team and the jungler is doing a lot of work. Now, the problem with Yumi is that even when you do punish it, if there is in this meta, especially with champions like Jinx and Zeri, if you have a lot of resets that are capable, or, you know, there's a snowball champion like Viego who's going to reset in a fight, there is more comeback potential at all times with the Yuumi, because the speed that she gives your carries and the healing that she gives your carries within a fight allows you on hyper carries to deal more damage and to come back from potentially unwinnable situations or situations that would be unwinnable without having a Yuumi on your roster. Right? And so that's the problem, is that it eliminates leads in a way. So it either snowballs leads. If you get ahead with the Yuumi, oh my God. Well, I mean, we've seen what players like Ruler can do with a Zeri Yuumi lane, right? If you get ahead, then you become an unstoppable juggernaut, basically. And if you're behind, it gives you more of an opportunity to win the game. So if you're winning, gives you less of an opportunity to lose. And if you're losing, more of an opportunity to win. And that's not what we want. We don't want champions to serve as like rubber band mechanics within the game. And I think that's part of the popularity with Yuumi, is that LCK has been the more conservative region, and it is a conservative choice because Yuumi basically can it exacerbates variance when you're winning, and it reduces variance when you're losing. And it's not a great thing. Right? So I don't know. It's been pretty unfortunate to watch Yuumi come back in the meta. I really appreciated it, how it was banned at MSI. And if they want this champion within the game, that's totally okay. I just don't understand why we can't have a permanent ban on Yuumi in professional play. That's what I don't understand.
I've made this point before, but I'll make it again. Why can't it just be like Magic the Gathering and that card is limited from pro play?
Yeah.
They do that with like the super powerful OP cards, of course. You don't have to keep tweaking forever and try a million times. Remember, the reason why I also hate it in League of Legends, I'll tie it into the static shift point now, Monty, is because there only are 2 splits each year. You're gambling people's whole world's appearance and careers on this shit. Like, I hate that, mate. I hate the idea that a fan on a wiki in 4 years from now will just look back and go, wow, I can't believe how shit player X was. And it's like, yeah, he was just on a team that didn't abuse Stack Shiv.
Yeah, I also just don't understand the purpose of not banning Yuumi. So Yuumi makes professional players mad. It makes the hardcore esports fans mad. Nobody likes this stuff. So the question is, what is the downside
and you make banning Yuumi? One side of the map OP, right? They're going to have the draft advantage all the time.
Well, I think when you look at Yuumi, right, and you say, well, if we banned a champion, and the reason why people watch esports a lot of the time is to get better at the game, or because they're active players within the game. Do we really think that there are a bunch of Yuumi mains who will not watch the World Championship if Yuumi is disabled? Did we see a drastic dip in MSI viewership because Yuumi wasn't there? You know what I mean? You don't lose anyone in terms of viewership by banning Yuumi, but by having Yuumi available, you piss off the most hardcore fans of your own product, and you piss off your professional players. Nobody likes this champion. I have seen 0 people who are fans of this esport who have said, you know what? This game is better because of Yuumi, because Yuumi is in it. I've seen that opinion from no pro players, no coaches, nothing.
I want to see the comments in Twitch chat, and I want to see them on the YouTube comments. Tell us your favorite Yuumi player.
They're all the same. They're all the same, Thorin. That's the thing. They're all the same.
You can't even name one. The joke is, as you said, your favorite Yuumi player is whichever mid laner or ADC they're attached to that you want to see go John Wick and fucking destroy everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do I mind? I think the upside, as you say, to Yuumi is because she speeds people up, it can be sometimes cool to see a player like Ruler have their mechanical limits tested on champions, because you have to click even faster in order to make the most out of the Yuumi.
I mean, my joke, it's a mean joke, but you know what? Why do I even give that disclaimer? This is the Thorin persona, kayfabe all day long, boys, right? I made this joke in the past, but I'm going to make it again. I know who the secret real power behind Riot is. It's whoever Mercer's uncle is. Because this guy's just keeping it. He's going to get a whole career off this champion. Like, he played it all the time in Misfits. He's still got a fucking job in Heretics. I don't know how he keeps fucking dodging by. I've said it before. He must just have the craziest Jedi mind trick of all time. Like, when Peter Dunn and the others walk in the room, we're like, we're really going to have to think who we're going to cut. And we should maybe start with, like, support. He's like, you don't want to start with support. They're like, oh, well, maybe we'll look to ADC then. Yeah, Jack Spectre, you're not really cutting it, actually. Get him off the team. Like, fucking hell, mate. This guy, he's going to have a whole career playing Yuumi. That's like, my joke is this. Yuumi, when you're a fucking support player that's supposed to be decent, it's like when you let your little brother play fucking, you're telling him he's playing as Tails in Sonic, but he hasn't got the fucking controller plugged in. It's old. It's really old dated reference, but if you know it, it's so fire. It's worth putting it out there. It's worth putting it out there. If you know the reference, you know it. Okay.
Do you want to talk about Team Heretics, because they were one of the surprises from LEC this week? Obviously, from their rather kind of disastrous start to 2023 to the major roster changes that they've accomplished now. Surprisingly, keeping Evie, I think, but otherwise parting ways with Jack Spectra and Ruby, who
let's just put this on the table, Monty. Even though, yes, Ebby is utterly terrible and indefensible, you have to realize when it comes to Ruby and Ebby, that's like a fucking Sophie's Choice where you secretly want them both to die, but you can only pick one. And you're like, well, bloody hell, which one's pissing me off more? I guess mid lane's more important, so fuck it, bring in VTO. You know what I mean?
But look, I said this on Power Spike, Thorin, but if Evie just becomes the Looper of this roster, remember, Looper is a literal world champion, and his one job was to TP into bot lane. And guess what? Evie's one job has been on Heretics so far.
It is TP, literally.
It's TP into bot lane. That's his job. And you know what? I'm here for it. I am here for Evie TPing into bot lane.
That the way they're using those players, because I know what pro players are like, mate, and especially a team that has like a Japanese player with a French player with a Spanish player. I'm telling you right now, that screams to me, fucking Peter Dunn coached the team well. He had them prepared for what they were going to do, and he told them, essentially drilled into them, we would do it in these. You have like a flow chart. When in this situation we do the TPs, because you know what it's like. Back in the TP meta, Western teams were terrible at it. They were always the ones at TP disadvantage, or they'd use it too early, or they didn't know when you should use it to flank. So, like, the idea, one of the worst teams in the league with like a couple of good players is pulling that off consistently. That just looks like coaching staff diff, mate. That looks like Peter Dunn's gone to work.
Yeah, that's my read. We know that Peter Dunn, even if he doesn't have the best players, the skills that Peter Dunn has are using the strengths of his players extremely intelligently and building play styles and rosters that will play in potentially very specific ways.
He's appropriately named because he is just Peter. I'll get it done. And he will get it done.
And this roster, what did we want to see? We wanted to see VTO kind of activated again after he had a disappointing 2023 coming off his MVP performances. Very intriguingly, like picking the Kai'Sa into Perks' LeBlanc. It was very obvious that, and we heard. I was reading Peter Dunn's tweets about that afterwards, where he said that he just trusted VTO to pick the Kai'Sa. Basically, the thrust of it was VTO said, "Hey, pick me." Perks is going to pick the Static Shiv LeBlanc. They had picked it the day before on Vitality and done very well. And obviously, guys, Perks picking Static Shiv LeBlanc is the most evident thing of all time, because first off, Perks loves to play LeBlanc and he loves to split push, and this basically activates all the good things about Perks, right? Which is his ability to put pressure on the map, his individual decision making. How many times has Perks won games by appropriately putting pressure down in a side lane, right? A bazillion. Like, as soon as I saw the Static Shiv, I was like, wow, this is actually going to be really good for Vitality. So they baited him into it. And even though VTO apparently did very badly in this matchup in practice, did really well with it on stage, also building the Static Shiv, right? Providing kind of a more AP hybrid build with Nashers and Ginsus and Zhonya's. So it was a good pickup, can match the side lane pressure as well with Kai'Sa. So I really enjoyed this pickup. But also at the same time, if you look at kind of the way that Heretics has been playing, you know, they've got Flacket on the Lucian, they've got Flacket on the Draven, and they're TPing very aggressively into the bot lane to push winning scenarios in the bot lane, and also a lot of the times to help feed kills onto VTO. So that has come as a sacrifice for Evie. And yes, Evie has also almost thrown games like we saw against Vitality. I assume that's a communication issue because he's walking up into the mid lane when his team isn't there sometimes, or they're not all there, overextending. But if he's doing his job, Evie, they can win with Evie playing this way. It's just he can't be expected to potentially carry.
I mean, it does also help him that Cassandra is still in the fucking meta. That certainly helps. And then here's the last thing that allows him to survive, Monty. This is why if I did have to do the Sophie's choice, I would have picked Ruby to die over Ebby in this metaphorical scenario in a video game Minecraft on twitch.tv. Because here's why, Monty. Right now, Europe has never had a weaker pool of top laners ever than this. If you watch the LPL and then you watch LEC, you would think one is like the little kids league. It's fucking sick how bad these top laners are. It's the shittest pool I've ever seen, because even the ones that potentially could be good, like the weak siders like Odoamne, are on the worst team. The ones that could be good are on the shittest team. So as a result, like, Ebby can get away with it. As long as he gets half the games on Cassandra, and as you say, he's never going to be expected to win his lane. They're going to just play around Vethio and Flackhead. They're going to use the TP. He can survive. It's fine. It's obviously a fucking band-aided team, but whatever. It's actually a solid team, though. When you look at how bad they were before, these are decent pickups. In fact, some of them are very good. I think the VTO one with Jankos, I can't wait to see how that keeps playing out. Flackhead's fine. Yes, he did that stupid fucking reckless around the Nexus, but whatever. By the way, this is where fans will always be insufferable, Monty. What they do is they've like slowed down the video, and they're like, actually, technically, you couldn't have entered the game. How did he know that in the time, you fucking clown? No one's that you don't know. The whole calculated meme comes from Hotshot GG and other people in like season 2, and the whole point of the meme is it's supposed to be ironic that of course you couldn't actually calculate if you're going to survive on 2 health. You obviously just gambled and you got lucky. No one actually calculates. I've said this before about the Jap teamfight breakdowns. What he's doing there is sort of articulating their actual like fucking subconscious understanding and feel for the game, but using the active voice as though that's what they're thinking. They're not actually thinking, and then I'm going to like bait out his flash, then I jump over it, then he clenches, then no, that's like, you know, here's the analogy that's mega one. That's like those fake self-defense courses they market for women, where they go right, and then a knife comes in here, you grab the hand, hi-ya, and then you pull him over your shoulder, punch, punch, punch. It's like while he's doing that, he stabbed you 5 times. If you know how like a real fight works, and that's what you're all making it sound. It's like when Soaz didn't hit that one last Nexus against OMG at season 5 Worlds, and they were like, you only needed to hit it one more time. He didn't know that. He didn't know that, did he? You know that because you paused it, went back, had a million arguments on Reddit, and in the end, someone ran the numbers. No, he didn't know that. The point is he didn't try to end the game. That's my problem. It's not about if you succeed. He didn't try to end the game. So even with that said, he's still fine. He's still a fine player.
Yeah, I also think that, and obviously this is the drum that I have been beating for many, many years. One of the primary problems with League of Legends is crits. And even though crits get weighted and, you know, it's not true RNG, one of the issues with that play is whether he was going to get crits or not onto the Ahri, right? And so if he can't calculate accurately what's going to happen, then random events can occur, which are going to change the outcome of that play. And I hate it. You know, frankly, I hate it. I wish they would just do away with crits in this game, figure out a different way to work Yasuo and some of these champions that have crits that are automatically built into their kit, or crits worth differently for them, like Jhin as well, right? Because it is just very frustrating, and it makes it really hard for pro players to make the right decision, and it makes it very hard for us to analyze what the right position was in that scenario. Also, just as a point in this game, this is why Yuumi shouldn't be allowed in professional play. The fact that SK was almost able to come back in this game is completely outrageous.
It was only.
And it was because of Zeri and Yuumi. It was because of Zeri and Yuumi that they were even in this game at all. And it shouldn't take us to the point where we have to see this play from Flackid for them to potentially win or lose this game, because they were dominating this game for a lot of it. They were just completely dominating it, especially through the bot lane. and we shouldn't be able to have a rubber band mechanic with Zera Yumi that can prop SK back into this game.
No, the other thing about that as well is that was the most extreme example I've seen. But even then, like, because of how far ahead fucking Heretics were, they still weren't going to lose the game. Like, yeah, the first fight they lost, it looked exciting. They would have had to do that perfectly, like 3 times in a row. And as you saw, even X couldn't do that. You got too high for you, went in the pit. They got caught one by one. Like the other thing about Heretics is there's no way they're going to stay 3-0. That's a fraudulent 3-0 right there. They're a better team, but like, mate, they could have lost a bunch of these games. Like, this was fucking sus as fuck the way they played it. Even against Vitality, they were just like trying to feed fucking kills to them. It was Ebby was actually criminal in that game, mate. That was one of those ones where they needed, woo, woo, woo. Right, we're going to fucking in police. What the fuck's going on here, sunshine? Look, you can't have a drink of water. And my fucking partner's coming in, Dom, and he's going to go fucking ham. So you better tell me now. Your fucking teammates have already told, you know.
Here's the thing about it, though, because they're only doing the single round robin. Going 3-0 basically guarantees that you are going to head into the next phase.
It's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Here's the thing. They're an all right team, Monty. They're going to be like 5th or 6th.
Oh, yeah, they're much better than they...
better. But they're not going to be like the best team. Come on, the 3-0, you're dreaming if you'd say that, you know. Strength of schedule is still king. Some of those games just didn't check the eye test, you know.
Yeah,
just is what it is.
Yeah, they're clearly not going to be the best team in this league, not by a long shot with some of the other rosters that you have here, and some of which that
the good news is that a lot of teams are
going to be able to bounce back.
So you can maybe steal some more wins. Yeah, there might be some more available. You might have a nick over some big teams because a lot of teams look fucking shaky right now, mate.
I think the biggest surprise for me isn't that necessarily G2 is doing well, because Broken Blade, who we thought would be kind of a liability at MSI, turned out to be one of their best players at MSI, and he's really stepped up, and we've seen some very good performances out of him. So I don't really know what was going on in spring, where he was so terrible a lot of the time, but whatever happened at MSI seems to have turned him around. Same thing with Licorice. Very weird that we would see these top laners who are getting bodied domestically show up at MSI and then completely continue that level of domination, at least in the early phases of summer. And Broken Blade has been doing well. But the biggest surprise to me, Thorin, has been that we've seen more of a standard style of play out of G2 so far. There hasn't been any kind of really yike trickery. We haven't seen the same reliance on their level 1 set plays. The game they lost to Mad Lions, they threw and should have won. The other games that they played looked really dominant. Caps looks better than he did at MSI, where I think he was a little suspect. Hansama returning to the form that we expect from him as a player, but we've really seen rather kind of standard compositions, no Belveth, no like hyper carry junglers coming out. Their wins have been with Yike on Maokai and playing more or less front to back team fighting compositions. And to me, you always know that G2 has the wild card, right? You know they can go back to these plays and play styles and compositions that are totally unique to them as a team. But you're not always confident that they can play standard super well, but they've been doing that. And I think that's a really good sign for them. And that's why I have so much faith in them winning LEC again.
No, I mean, right now, here's the problem. Before the split began, I was on Mega Vitality Hopium because I just look at the roster and it's like, bro, you just keep looking at the lineup and you're like, how can this not be really good? I'll even say this, considering Vitality looks shit, they could have been 3-0 this week. They were in all 3 of those games. But unfortunately, if Vitality isn't going to be it, BDS is exposed. Mad Lions is pretty good, but they just don't have the best players. G2 should win. It's a bit like Cloud9 and LCS. Like right now, there's no reason you shouldn't be the best team. They should walk it, basically.
Yeah. And, it's great that Mad Lions was able to take that win off of them and kind of battle back. And I think, at least so far, like Mad Lions has been really good. One thing that's been a very pleasant surprise from Mad Lions is that RZ appears to be able to play Aphelios now, which has just never been true previously. We've talked many times on this show how in previous Aphelios metas, Karzi career has, a very substandard win rate, and he's looked really bad. He has avoided playing Aphelios by playing champions like Ezreal instead in those metas, playing off-meta picks. But some of the team fighting that we've seen from him in these games on Aphelios has looked very, very strong. And if he has fixed kind of this hole in his champion pool, it's obviously an excellent sign for Mad Lions because they have the players to support Carzzy and allow him to pop off. Like, Nitsky is going to be self-sacrificial in order to get the AD carry online. And if he can play all the necessary champions in a hyper carry ADC meta, great. Like, that's going to be a really good sign for Mad Lions overall.
The big positive with Mad Lions to me is this. There's another team that are so obviously well coached, because that is a team with a bunch of players that can be inters. Mate, if you put them on their own in different teams, I guarantee you Carzzy, Hylissang and the Chasey guy wouldn't. And they even occasionally in this team. But this is one of those teams that's like 5 fingers of a hand. They all play together. They all go in together. They all understand each other's weaknesses even and are covering for each other. Like, it's actually a really well put together squad. My problem is just this. You already saw it at MSI. You can't want this team to be a Worlds team, guys. This is one of those teams at Worlds that will never make the jump. They will just go there and get battered across the board. And I just can't see how they can be good. That's my only issue. In LEC, they're fine. They could be in the finals again. They're good enough.
I mean, I think that's kind of the issue overall is just, again, the individual player strength. If you're watching, especially LPL right now, I think LCK has been a bit shaky so far this split. They've looked a little less polished, but some of the individual skill that we're seeing from LPL and the fact that LPL actually did make some very important mid-season roster moves in order to prop up teams that were good but not necessarily contenders, such as Gala going to LNG is obviously like a huge one over there. It's the teams in LPL right now, like the top of the league is just so insanely stacked. And the other thing too is that top esports seems to have gotten their shit together, which was a major problem. So if Top is now good, an actually good team, and we'll get some evidence because Top plays JDG this week, and LNG has an improved roster. Billy has been just getting better and better as time went on. We didn't expect them to be the team that went to MSI. Like, nobody picked that one, right? And we even have Weibo looking better, and obviously the rise of OMG over the last season. WE is also kind of a surprising standout right now. I think obviously their strength of schedule is not amazing, and they're going to kind of come back down to earth. But the only team that we would say really fell off was EDG, and part of that was we've seen worse performances from players like Fofo, but they were
the best players.
And they cut Leave this we had all the conversation on the show. Is Leave or Pays like the best rookie of 2023? And he got into some outside of game scandals with prostitution and some other shit. You guys can look that up if you're so inclined. Now they have signed Uzi, but again, this is a Uzi that maybe not at the peak of his powers right now. And EDG was always a team that was based off of they were more than the sum of their parts. That's why they were surprising in terms of their performance last split. But losing their up-and-coming star 80 carry in an 80 carry meta is really rough, right? And it's highlighted kind of the subpar performances of players like Fofo. And I don't think that EDG necessarily has the firepower to get back on top, especially when the teams with the firepower who are underperforming like Top are now looking significantly better.
They were another team, EDG, where it just looked like great job by the coaching staff. You must have just worked magic here, getting everyone on the same page, because the Ale guy's like what Bin was. He's a coin flipper. JJ has some amazing games. He has some whatever games. Leave was the best player on the team. 4-4's a bit shaky at mid. He was a monster in the LMS, but that's just a much weaker league, so it's obvious he wouldn't be as good, I'm afraid. None of the guys who were the mid laners, Maple, etc., have never really been able to crack the LPL and truly be elite. They've just been good or mid-table. So the problem they have as a team, basically, is the Uzi I think's just thrown a wrench into the whole team. And as you say, the rest of the league's so strong. Like, this is where I always know that people on Reddit just don't even watch the games, mate. Because they didn't do that well in the last split, everyone just told me, what do you expect? Rookie's been watched for years. You don't watch the games. I'm just telling you. I used to hate that as an insult because people would say it to me when they just disagreed with me. I can tell you just don't watch the games. Like, he's having some fucking stellar carry performances. He even did last split. He'd have games where he just looked like his old self. You put him on his signature champions, he'd monster you. You put him on an Ari or something, it'll give you a good game, of course. So people don't know how deep the LPL is. It's crazy now. It's crazy how deep it is.
Yeah, and considering they're going to send 4 teams to Worlds, it's regardless of which teams fall out of form, there are going to be so many potential good rosters. I mean, there's probably 6 at least teams that are going to be really world class in terms of individual
they're all playing
strength.
against JDG. They're all getting that fucking experience, leveling up, seeing what happens when you give a Yumi to a ruler type team. They know what it's like. They don't have to wonder, oh, can we counter this? Like, they know you can't.
Yeah, I think WE is going to fall off, but think about these teams that are also at the top of the league. Top, Billy, JDG, Weibo, LNG, and OMG.
And Scout is still a stud if no one's been watching. He might just be going for another MVP, mate. He's just fucking monster.
LNG is my favorite LPL team, so I'm happy they got Gala, and they actually dealt top their only loss in the first week of competition in the LPL, and that I think it's going to take longer for them to fully integrate Gala. And I haven't actually seen, so we're recording this at 8 a.m. my time, and so last night BLG did 2-0 LNG, so I haven't seen those matches yet. But yeah, I mean, I think LNG probably won't win the league, but it's if you had watched this team last split, you would definitely say that Gala is a massive upgrade and they should be a better team. And it just goes to show how strong some of these other teams have gotten within the LPL. Indeed. So I think if you look at LPL, and again, this all started as a conversation about how weak the West is looking right now. And if you are keeping your eye, especially on LPL at this point in time, it becomes very evident because of the wealth of teams that they have at the top. Whereas the LCK, I think some of the teams have looked shakier than we might have expected. And I think there's really only 3, maybe 4 teams that will be competitive. And a lot of these teams are going to be worse, I think, than the LPL teams are.
I mean, right now, especially with the meta, the way it is, and the way the game is right now, dude, this is the LPL's world right now. We just live in it. Like, as you say, even LCK's had sort of a slow start. I mean, by the way, spoiler, this next week, this is the dream fucking day of games. Literally, the best teams are going to all play each other. You're going to have
really
the fucking telecom war, the GenG war. That one's going to be a banger. But aside from that, it does look a bit lackluster across the league, I have to say. LPL's just popping right now, mate.
Yeah. And I will say, like, part of my bias is going to be that this last week of LCK games was really it. Like, there were just no premier matchups in the last week, and it was a lot of stomps. It was every match was a 2-0 except for Breon beating Dplus Kia. And you guys who didn't watch the games might be like, "Oh, well, how did that happen? That's a major upset." Well, Deft had COVID and they had a substitute player, so let's not read too much into that one. And by the way, when Deft was playing remotely against Nongshim, looked amazing, and they completely bodied Nongshim in the series that we talked about with Canyon's Nico Jungle earlier. But I'm not excited about Dplus Kia yet because their strength of schedule has been very weak, and this coming week is when they play KT and GenG, who are the 2 best teams in the league right now, and those are going to be the matches where we actually learn a lot about Dplus, and Dplus versus KT is happening tonight as of the recording. So it'll all already be finished by the time some of you guys watch this VOD or catch up on the podcast. But this is a good time, I think, Thorin, to talk about our match of the week.
I'll just quickly say though, that's why I do get sad about Dplus though, because on paper it should be so good. Fucking Deft, Showmaker, and Canyon. Like, by the way, they're a team that, remember, never had the fucking dominant ADC. They never had the player they could play through. They always had to play through top side of the map. This is your time, but somehow it just has never fully worked. Like, they had the slight spring run when they were good, but like it's never come together like you hoped it would, you know. This looked like it could actually be. I mean, he won that Worlds on sort of a fluke and he wasn't the main reason. This looked like Deft might actually get one last like really good year out of his career and have a chance to win it all again.
Look, it's a veteran group of players, Thorin, and this is the danger that we always talk about with Dplus Kia. It's the reason why GenG didn't pick them in the playoffs of spring, because it's always been kind of a bad matchup for GenG, and GenG has like responded very poorly to some of the weird stuff that Dplus will do in these series, like play Karthus jungle, or last year when Dplus almost beat GenG by using the Nidalee pick, and it was a miracle that GenG was able to come back to make it to the finals in game number 5. They have had, Damwon / Dplus has kind of been their Achilles heel. But the problem with Dplus is that they're veteran players who have had such insane peaks that you're always afraid that they're going to get back to those peaks, right? Like the known quantity of these players is so high that you just have to avoid them. And even though they might be mediocre throughout the entire split, it's like what we said at Worlds last year. I mean, they made a deeper run than we thought they would have at Worlds in 2022 and had a better performance. And if this team starts, all pistons are firing at some point in the qualifiers or the playoffs, they can win. They can always potentially win. They have the group of players that we know can win. Their roster is incredibly strong. Their champion pools are super deep. They have crazy flexing that nobody else can do. Like I said earlier, Canyon's the only player in any major region in the world who's played Nico in the jungle so far, and Nico has been an incredibly popular pick. We've seen it all over the LPL, 100% pick ban rate, mostly banned within the LCK, and he was super dominant on it against Dongshim. Think about the other strengths that Dplus Kia has as a team. They can flex Talia in the jungle. Canyon could play so many different junglers. He's back on some Lee Sin now, which we've seen somewhat in other leagues, but obviously it's a fringe meta pick at the moment. So you never really know what you're going to get with Dplus. He's playing Scion in the jungle now, for fuck's sake. Like now that's
like a box of chocolates, basically, Monty.
Yeah, you just never know what they're going to do. And so they're really dangerous on red side because they have all these flex picks and they'll just take Scion and then, flex it into the jungle. You have no fucking clue what's going to happen. They'll take Nico and flex in the jungle. They'll take Talia and flex it into the jungle. So with clever drafting, I think they can do well. They're also in a meta where Kana famously was undefeated this year on Renekton until he played against Brion. Now, they did lose to Brion when he was playing Renekton, but again, they had a substitute player at 80 carry, and Deft has been their most consistent carry this year, so losing Deft is really a very detrimental blow. But if you think about it, well, we're moving into guess who's a Jinx god? Oh, right. It's Deft, right? We're moving into a meta where you can really rely on Deft to play. And as Wolf and I talked about on the Monte and Wolf show, they do better when they're like hard winning in the bot lane. And I think that they struggle when they don't really push very aggressively through the bot lane and set Deft up for success. So in some ways, despite all of their varied champion pools, their play style is a little bit one-dimensional. But a lot of the reason that was true is because Showmaker himself said he was burnt out earlier this year, right? We haven't seen the level that Showmaker's capable of. But this meta, by the way, guys, if you want to see Static Shiv LeBlanc, Showmaker is sublime on this very broken champion. Watch those Nongshim games. He's a great Talia player, right? He can play Annie. Twisted Fate is buffed. He is historically an amazing Twisted Fate player. This seems like a meta that is very, very primed for Dplus to be successful if they can kind of push through their own bullshit, because they have been their own worst enemy, right? It's not that they lack the skill, it's that they've lacked the coordination and the decisiveness and the ability to shift their play style into other players carrying. But if Showmaker is on form and motivated and practicing, that's probably the kick in the ass this team needs, and they could be a very dangerous threat.
So what is the game of the week then?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked. So we've got a fun new promotion from Esports Bet, guys. So if you are signed up with our referral link, which you can see on your screen and will also be a link below, so sign up. It is free. You can play for free with DJT, guys, and then change that DJT into crypto, like real money, crypto, right? So if you go to esportsbet and sign up with our referral link, we now have a new promotion, and this one's very cool, which is that we are picking a match of the week every week to highlight. And what happens is if you are signed up with our referral link and you place a prediction on that match, you will get a 10% additional bonus to your winnings up to the equivalent of $100 of USDT. So if it's DJT, you'll get 10% equivalent to $100 USDT, up to, I should say, as long as you place a large enough prediction. Or if you're using other crypto, it will be the equivalent of $100 USDT. So obviously that means if you win $1,000 of USDT, you would get the full $100, no more than that. So it's a way to basically win more. And our match of the week this week is the telecom war, which is T1 versus KT. Also, if you guys are signing up, this is another reason to use our referral link. The same old bonuses apply, which means that you can either get a 50% deposit bonus up to $200 or a risk-free bet up to $100 USDT. So you can afford to kind of take a flyer on something and get some good returns. So
remember, this was the fucking banger matchup last splitting in the playoffs. This was the one you wanted to watch.
KT should have won in the playoffs. KT should have won the series in the upper bracket. It's always been close between these two teams. And T1 has consistently come ahead. But one of the things about betting on these matches is that the T1 line is always so crazy. So right now, the live odds are, by the way, guys, 1.375 to T1 to 3.142 for KT. KT is the better team right now, guys. How do they have over 3? So even if you were to believe that this is a coin flip match, the odds of T1, the T1 fans always are putting huge amounts down onto T1, so you can get some really good value. This is the time to use your risk-free bet up to $100 on KT, because you can either get your money back or you're going to get a huge payout, right? At basically 3.14 odds. And so I'm taking KT all day here, and you can get an additional 10% if you're right, one way or another. So yeah, I think like this matchup in particular, KT has just been fabulous. And you can point to the fact that, yeah, they lost to GenG. If you want to ignore the fact that the loss to GenG was part of the whole bullshit where aiming bought the static shiv even though it was banned. Again, that was patch 13.10. It's now fixed for 13.11, which they're on this week. So that's why you can buy static shiv again, because of the interaction with the Renata glass gold. So basically, hilariously, just more spaghetti code for you guys. What apparently would happen is that if the user got ulted by Renata Glask, then what would happen is there were some fringe interactions where Static Shiv would allow you to farm your own minions Dota style. Now, ignoring the fact that Renata Glask was not even in this game, it was still a banned item. So that interaction could not have occurred. But I do think that rather tilted KT. I mean, they were already behind in that game, so we can argue whether they would have won anyway. But I think it really did have a mental effect on the whole series, caused an hour delay while Hirai, the coach, was arguing with them. And then he later got suspended and fined $2,000. Whole shit show over there. And also KT won the first game of that series incredibly convincingly against GenG. So I think those teams are the top 2 teams overall in the league right now. But KT has they've just been wonderful to watch, man. My guy Keen has been doing insane work. He is the best top laner.
A great renaissance in his career, isn't it? He's so good.
I am so happy. To see Keen.
And he has a team,
he was
finally.
so bad last year. He was so bad last year. And he's a player that I've always loved. And now we can see it was just the motivation probably from being on a shit roster. Same thing with BDD. BDD is another player who has had a major renaissance after having a really, really tough 2022. But Keen's just a complete package right now, man. Excellent flanking, excellent team fighting, can play tanks for the team, super threatening on carries, and if he gets ahead, he doesn't throw. It's like if you give him an advantage on Renekton or Jax, he's just going to take over the entire game. So I've been loving watching Keen play. Could it be a better meta for BDD? Azir's back in the pool right now. He's been a great Taliyah player historically. I'm sure his split push LeBlanc, if he ever gets the static shiv, is going to be great as well. This guy is Twisted Fate. He was one of the very few Twisted Fate players in the world earlier this year. That was kind of, to be on the nose, his wild card pick that got them really far and caused some pretty significant upsets. Now that's been buffed. So KT has been the kind of front to back hyper carry team fighter throughout the last couple of years of his play. And we can say, okay, he's not the best AD carry, but he doesn't have to be. And Cuz, frankly, has looked really comfortable on Viego and Sejuani. The problem is like, the sus thing about this team, Thorin, is that I don't fully trust that Cuz's very good performance is going to continue. I find it difficult to believe that he's going to continue playing at the level he has been.
Shaky player, hasn't he?
Yeah, so I think maybe it has been a bit streaky, and he's been flipping heads quite a bit more than perhaps he should have. But I can hope that this is a new run of form. But at the same time, who are we comparing KT to, right? Faker hasn't been as good this split so far as he was last split. On GenG, Doran has been quite bad so far this split. So there's clear weaknesses on some of the other top LCK rosters, and KT has just they've looked very complete as a team in the early stages of this event.
I mean, the dream is that you just get these 4 teams as the 4 worlds teams. You just get GenG, T1, Dplus, and KT. If those are the 4 teams, and then we have 4 really strong LPL teams, this world's going to be the best worlds ever.
Yeah, I hope that's true. I'm still worried about the Swiss. That scares me quite a bit.
I'm going to actually do a video on that soon, because what I'll have to do is this. Here's what the problem I've realized. I'll have to simultaneously use like a Counter-Strike Major example to show how scuffed it can be, but I know fans won't get it unless I do this. I'm going to have to actually do like a dry run one with real teams, so you know the teams I'm talking about, and show you the nightmare scenarios that can happen. Because it's only once you realize the bad teams that can get through, and the nightmare scenarios for the good teams, where you lose 2 out of your 3 lives playing other top 14. Until you see that, you won't know why it's that bad. Because when you hear it theoretically, it sounds all right. You think, oh, it's not bad, or maybe it's even cool. You have like you don't know who you're playing. It's randomized. But once you see it, you'll just realize there'll always be one team gets mega fucked by it, basically. I think Lopez even ran the numbers once that if you used Swiss the way it used to be done back in the day, that like even though 8 teams get out, if you have a 16-team field, mathematically, if the better team won every match, like you can still only get 7 of the top 8 can get out because of how it works or something, and 1 bad team has to make it. So it's like, because it's the sort of thing Tommy/Lopez does, like just fucking run numbers like that. So it's just got flaws to it, boys. But at the same time, I did hate round robin, so whatever. I guess I'll take it for now. I just don't get it why we have other tournaments with best of 3s and then fucking double a limb. Why can't we just have that? But we can't. We can't have.
Who knows? We're not allowed to have nice things, right?
Oh.
Riot decided that nice things are illegal, and so we can't have them. I just to keep people up to date, because we've been basically future-proofing ourselves by talking about how shit Swiss is, because we know it's going to be shit in this one, especially because, as we said a million times, we don't have real seeding because there aren't a bunch of international tournaments to seed teams around. And the international tournaments that we do have are so old and out of date in terms of patches and recent performance that it doesn't make sense to seed off of MSI for Worlds. So why don't you explain to people? Because again, we had some really weird shit happen in Swiss at the latest major. So to explain to people why Swiss sucks. What happened? Explain what happened at the latest major.
The simplest example is this. Because you don't have real seeding, Valve does not allow seeding based on world rankings. They do seeding for real based on where you placed in the qualifier. Now, this is what we agreed upon for Flashpoint. We're only using group stages to eliminate teams. We're not using it to actually like decide who's the best. And so basically, they used stupid stuff like a Swiss system in the RMR. If you came like 3rd or 4th out of it, you didn't get a top seed. And in fact, there was something, I remember hearing this on Richard's stream, I didn't verify it, where even though Heroic was the #1 team in the world and 3-0'd their Swiss system, because there's 2 Swiss systems in Europe and then a bunch that were in the other regions, they ended up 5th seed at the major. The #1 team in the world that won every single match ended up 5th seed at the major. Like, that can happen. So here's how it can go. You get this every time you do the semi-randomized or bad seeding. What happens is you get 2 top 4 teams just play each other in the first match. So one of them is 0-1. That's one of the 3 tournament lives in a BO1 gone, just because you had to play a world-class team. Meanwhile, because of the way the wacky seeding works, there will always be like 10th team plays what would be in a real seeding the 13th team. And one of them gets to be 1-0. And so as a result, the bad teams, it's not, I don't have a problem with upsets if they're legit. But when it's an upset, like I play 2 bad teams to get 2 of my wins out of the 3 I need, and then I play 1 good team and happen to fluke a win, that's whack. So what happened is there were teams like, I'd have to go and look at the specific ones. Like I'll quickly look one up now, because I know there was a couple that played monster lineups. So I'll quickly look who did it. So in the Legends stage, you had... let's see. In the first round of the whole tournament, FaZe Clan played in Heroic, and those would have been, off the top of my head, like number 1 seed in the world, number 4 seed in the world, but we didn't have seeding, like ranking rather. Number 1 versus number 4 played in the first match. G2 and Vitality, also 2 of the top 4 teams in the world, played in the first match. So 2 of those teams, 2 top 4 teams, had to be 0-1 just from playing the other best teams in the world. Meanwhile, you had matches like Apex, who were nobodies, played Into the Breach, who most people in Counter-Strike had never even heard of. And one of them got to be 1-0. And yeah, in the end, both made the playoffs. Great. But part of the reason why was because they played wonky teams. And in fact, if you go look at the team that made the final, Gamer Legion, the only top team they beat was Heroic in the semi-finals of the major. They went through the whole tournament, bro. They were in the first Swiss system. They were 0-2 against bad teams. They got out of that playing middling teams and getting crazy luck with the draw. They got into the next phase, didn't have to beat anyone good again. Like, it was all right, I guess, to win over Nip. And then they made it to the playoffs. All they did, look, they did a crazy upset against Heroic, but that was it. This can happen. So if you give the quick, I'll give the quick analogy is what I'll do in the video. Think about how Riot seeds, right? So, you know, for Worlds, the number 1 seed from all 4 regions gets treated the same, Monty. They treat the LCS seed as if they're the LPL seed. So imagine this in the Swiss system. Imagine, because you're going to use the pool system again, imagine that the seeding goes, Cloud9 could play number 4 team from LCK. That's a nightmare for Cloud9, but I'm a number 1 seed. Or they could play like someone from fucking Vietnam. And so now Cloud9 gets a 1-0 easy. Now, if you're, let's say GenG wins Korea or T1, I'll say GenG. Say GenG's number 1 seed. What if they play like number 3 seed or number 4 seed from LPL? That's really fucking hard. I'm the 1 team, but I've had a game I might lose there. So I might be 0-1 because I played one of the better teams. So the problem with it is it's so scuffed. Then you have the scenario where it's like, what happens in the next round when a bunch of these games, what happens if KT plays against fucking G2? That's a bad one, I guess. Oh, that could happen. KT against G2. And then in this scenario, say G2 can win. That might be a game they might be able to win in a BO1. Let's say KT loses and GenG loses their game against number 4 of number 3 seed from LPL. Now KT plays GenG in the 0-2 match. 0-1 match, rather. One of them's going to be 0-2 after only playing legit teams. You see what I mean? Meanwhile, the Cloud9s of the world could keep fluking it. They could be a team like the number fucking, I mean, the EU team could obviously play a bomb team and then they're in the 1-0 match. And suddenly Cloud9's 2-0, two out of the 3 ways to get out the group. I'm not sure how many there's going to be in this one. Meanwhile, they never played a top team. So what it's going to mean is, like, it's actually going to make it less special to make playoffs in some ways. Because if you've never seen the Swissisms at the major, there are always 1 or 2 crazy fluke teams that get to a playoff. And there's always 1 or 2 top teams just get this crazy nightmare run of murderer's row of teams that you can't beat.
Yeah, and also it just made for a really uncompelling kind of audience draw for the major finals because nobody knows who Gamer Legion is. You know, they're not a team that has historically been dominant in Counter-Strike. They don't have players that really are that famous or superstar level. And by the time they got to the finals, Vitality just kind of clapped them. So, I mean, if you're watching that first map and Vitality is completely dominating them in front of what was a home crowd in Paris, like, it's not going to make you stick around potentially to watch the entire event. So,
and here's an obvious question I have.
Rather underwhelming.
Here's a take, but I can't remember what year I made it in, but it's aged so well, Monty. I always said that take of you can't have teams from the same region in the same group was always so shit. Because what it meant was you just got these crazy uneven groups because of the seeding. So Europe or NA could get a fluke and not have one of China or Korea in their group, which made an easier group. But the other reason why it sucked is because what Riot wanted to do with their egalitarian seeding was do the actual, what I think is the lie of egalitarianism. You assume everyone can be as good as everyone, but the reality always is they're not as good as everyone. And this is competition. So what they did, Monty, was for 10 years of flexing how fucking egalitarian they are, they wasted world championships. And for what? Was it so that every region could be built up and finally it would make sense to have the account? No, they just bailed out at the end of the end. 10 years later, they went, actually, you know that whole thing we were building up, but turned out they never made it. So we scrapped the whole thing. And now it's just a giant group where now it's the opposite. Now you can just run into people all fucking day long. Because I don't think they like stop regions meeting in this one, right? I'm assuming not.
I don't know if we have the details on,
because I feel like it would just scoff the Swiss system too much if
there is some details about the actual seeding of the Swiss tournament. I'd have to go into the rule books right now.
Fair enough, whatever. It's not a big deal.
I'm not going to do it. But it doesn't, guys, here's the reason. It doesn't matter because we can't get proper seeding anyway because of the way that League of Legends works. So it doesn't really matter how they're going to seed it because there is no way to seed it is the point. So they may have put some rails in when it comes to regions facing off against each other, but in best of ones, I don't really think that makes a lot of sense because you're kind of just one and done with that result at that point in time, and you're setting up another one. So
the thing I don't get as well as this, Monty, I'll tell you the thing that right now kills me when people say that thing out loud. Well, it would be unfair and biased to seed the teams, Monty, because we can't know how good they are playing against each other. Here's the thing, though. We can guess, right? We can guess. There's no one actually would have fucking number 3 seed from NA as good as the number 3 seed from LPL. No one would. No one would be as ridiculous as that. So what would happen is this, Monty. Even if me and you can argue, should this team be 8th or 10th, we would never fuck up and have them 4th. That's what happens with the kind of scuffed seeding we have. And the reason why that actually sucks, if you do that approach also, let me think where I was going with this, is they've already at MSI proven they are biased and will do things that aren't actually traditionally in the rules because they had a final that did not have a bracket reset. That is an artificial introduction. That is not how double elim works. Now, I agree with it. I don't want to have an extra match. It would scuff the whole thing. But you've already chosen there to be biased. You're saying, I don't really care that you haven't lost a tournament life. In the final, there is no tournament lives, and you just have to play. And if the other team wins from the lower bracket, if BLG had won, tough shit, JDG. They get to lose one more times. That's fine to me, because you're like a human stepping in and going, look, I can see this system has some flaws to it, so I'm going to remove one, even if it's biased. So do the same thing for Worlds. Like, I would genuinely say there's 2 approaches you could take. You could either do in Counter-Strike, where the teams collectively seed each other. They're the ones playing each other in scrims. And in theory, if you don't know, the genius move ESL did, but actually got taken out of Counter-Strike, was you seed each other, or each team says from 1 to 15 where the other team should place. And the rule was, if yours is too much of an outlier compared to the other teams, it's just removed. So if you try to scuff it and go, lol, I'm going to put C9 bottom, then your vote doesn't even get to count. Now actually C9 will be higher because of your stupid thing. So one, that would be decent. It would at least get them roughly where you might get them. And then secondly, the other one is, and I don't even care that people might think this is outrageous, I would actually, for real, here's the problem in League. League is the game I think will be the worst for this, but it's still better than the current system. Get together 2 or 3 experts from each region, sit them in a room, and have them argue it out and make a seeding aggregate. Now, the reason I say in League I think it would be bad is because almost certainly the Korean ones will be biased as hell and the Chinese ones will be biased as hell, and I don't know how fair any region would be, but at least that is better than the current system. Because as I say, it is so stupid in a world with 4 LCK and 4 LPL to treat number 1 team from LCS as if they're better than fucking 6 of those teams. It's just patently stupid at this point in time. We've seen too much League of Legends. It's so silly.
I mean, I think the problem, the additional problem with League is that you just don't have, there are too many games, so it's really hard for people to accurately rank the teams. I mean, there are very few people in the world you could actually trust to do this. And those people are like probably Kadril, LS, Dom, the major co-streamers, because we know they're watching all the games. And I hate to say it, but I don't trust that a lot of these casters are watching the other games because I listen to their commentary at international events and it makes me question whether they've actually seen a lot of these games, right? Like, I had to suffer through people telling me that Doran is an amazing Gragas player because he had 2 pop-off Gragas games in the finals, but that wasn't really reflective of his performance over, I don't know, this year or his career. And so there's insane bias to like the high stakes games that happen. And even the people who I think are the biggest experts, Riot's never going to use them because only one of them is an actual caster for Riot, right? And so they'd have to pay LS and Dom to do some sort of ranking. But even these people are not going to see all of the major games in the world. Like, I watch a ton of games, but I only watch the good LPL games. I'm not in there in, like, you know, the weeds like Dom is. And likewise for Dom, he's not watching all of the kind of garbage LCK games that I have a tendency to watch because I'm doing that show with Wolf and I need to talk about those teams. And I just have a more you know, it's easier to get a hold on LCK because there are fewer games, basically, and there's fewer teams, right? But it's really hard to cover both Asian regions if you're also watching Western regions. And so therefore, no one is really able to be the expert necessary to rank these teams.
And I'll give you a last angle. This is where, unfortunately, positive reinforcement will fuck people's brains. The reason why I can tell you right now, I do not believe they will change this system, Monty, is because you won't believe this. It's such an insane fluke that had nothing to do with Riot. But in Valorant, they have actually locked into their dream, and all the regions are producing teams that can win the championship. That is real. Even Pacific region, which was supposed to be the weakest one, has top tier. So the fucked up thing is that United Colors of Benetton approach in Valorant has worked. And so because of that, it's worked at the last couple of events. They're going to think it did work, but it's actually one of the worst approaches. Because as I say, I've always said this: if everyone is good, then no one is good. Then there isn't seeding, is there? Everyone's just equal. Whereas the whole point of seeding is you just want to make it so that it's not, like I said before, people miss this all the time. They think, but what you're doing is taking the best team and then they just have to play a bad team. And what about the bad team? No, what we're saying is this. It's stupid that the best team could play like the fifth best team and then the third best team and then potentially the second best team and go out of the tournament 0-3. That is so silly. Meanwhile, there is a team that could be like fucking 8th, go to like 5th, go to 13th and get through 3-0. Those are just, obviously one is more unfair to a better team. And so I just want a world where that's eliminated. I don't think it can happen in League, though. As we said, there's too many logistics that make it feel like and also, spoiler, they aren't even having this convo at Riot HQ. If you played this, they'd think this was in Chinese. They wouldn't have any clue what we're talking about right now, mate. They aren't even thinking about these things. I don't think they care at all, mate.
It is mind-blowing to me that they would look at the Counter-Strike major and think that this is the format that we need to copy.
That's how I know people looking at the grass is always greener, because I told you, Monty, it was only a couple of years ago that stupid CSGO pros who live on the dream circuit, by the way, where you win tons of prize money, you have quite a good salary, you travel the world, but then go home to your family, your girlfriend, and your best friends in your home city for weeks and weeks out of each month. They were the ones saying, you know, we really need an LCS type league. Motherfuckers, they are all just looking, the grass is always greener. They can't get it. Meanwhile, like, spoiler, go talk to some of my mates who played in LCS for 8 years. They'll tell you what it's like. If you're in the bad team, it's like being in prison. Your sentence never ends. You get to go home for like a month. You meet that friend and he's just like, oh, how you doing? I've only sort of seen you 3 times in the last 5 years. Like, it's fucking shit. Meanwhile, like, for real, the best player in the world sadly, when it was simple, obviously he couldn't go to Ukraine, but like Zero can just go home to France and see his family and see his mom and see his friends from home, meet him on the weekend, then the next week fly out and go to the next event. Like, that is so OP. So to me, people always only look at the good part when they look at the grass is always greener concept. They don't realize that, like, it comes with a negative. So the joke is, I actually want the MSI format for the CSGO majors, and I want to get rid of Swiss completely, but then I also want to take the CSGO circuit and get rid of the leagues in League and put them over there. And so no one has the ideal circuit at the moment. I mean, maybe Dota does to some degree, but it has its own flaws too.
Yeah. No, the whole thing's really rough, and I'm not sure there's a way to fix it outside of just changing the format from like, you can literally just do what you did with MSI at Worlds. Right, we could literally just have a very, very similar format with GSL groups for play-ins into a double elimination bracket.
I mean, that would be banging, mate.
Most of the problem.
It's the best scenario possible. Because as I said on that one, I know, because Dom and them are trained to watch the single eliminate national tournaments, they overreacted to that upper bracket, I told you guys, because the lower bracket was going to fix it all. In the lower bracket, you did get to have BLG against GenG and T1. And it all worked out in the end. I mean, we didn't get the repeat Korean team versus JDG, but whatever, you can't have it all. Sometimes your gout just ruins your dreams. I used to be a fan of top esports, so I know that. Shout out your gout and all those fucking finals. And Jackie Love, he did his fucking fair share too. He was carrying his own weight, certainly.
All right. Any other topics on your mind from the major leagues right now?
Is there anything else big going on? I would just say in general,
as much as
the quality of the league is shit at the beginning, I just love the LEC format, mate. Like, it's so cool, even when I think it's scuffed to be like, well, it's only 2 more weeks, then we get the groups, it's BO3s. I'll start to see how good they are. Then I go into the BO5s with the double elim. I actually think the LEC format is the future, mate. I hope they can port that to a bunch of regions.
It also just makes the stakes so high for the last week of competition, because it's really hard to be completely out of it by the last week, or completely guaranteed.
Yes.
So again, I'm not a fan of playing 3 different teams in best of ones in a 3-day period. I think that's a lot to ask of a team and introduces variance. But I can't deny that having just the single round robin does increase the stakes and makes matches very, very meaningful to who's going to get into the top 8. And I don't mind the high variance when 8 out of 10 teams go to the next phase. That doesn't seem too punishing. Like, if you can't get into top 8, I'm not going to shed tears for you that you were not able to play some best of 3s, right? 80% of the league moving on. You really have to be pretty garbage, like definitively garbage, to fall out at that stage. So not too bad. It's not like what we see in the LCS, where they get 80% of their teams into playoffs after playing twice the amount of games. And especially most of the time, they're not even, playing 3 games in 1 week, unless the players walk out and shorten their own season. So yeah, I am excited about the LEC format. In some ways, though, it kind of makes the LEC not, I guess, the most compelling viewership for the first couple of weeks of competition, but still fun.
But that's the LCS the whole way.
So, exactly.
As I said, I can accept the compromise, because as you said, Monty, it's only the bottom 2 get eliminated, so you have to be pretty bad not to make it. And you just think only 2 more weeks. If you're in the LCS, it's like, only 8 more weeks, 8 more weeks, and Daddy's coming out. Like, fucking, it's mental, mate. It's so outrageous.
I do like the fact that the LCS is, the regular season's only going to be 6 weeks this time around, and then they're going to move directly into the playoffs, which is their crazy 8-team double elimination bracket. By the way,
every split that we can get a fucking shorter split. Nice one. Yeah, do it again.
By the way, this time around, the playoffs for LCS are going to be like a month long, and so we are going to see the playoffs be almost as long as the actual split itself.
Also, remember, guys, because I know everyone's going to keep forgetting it. Remember, at the end of the 2 playoffs of LEC and LCS, there's an international show-off for the 4th seed for Worlds.
Yeah, that's true. That's going to be really fun.
Playoff. That's going to be fucking amazing.
That was a very good change that they made.
Like, remember, that could actually for real be someone like fucking BDS or Vitality against like Golden Guardians or something. That could be a fucking really fun game before we go to Worlds.
Yeah. I'm curious where, like, is it going to be in Korea?
I can't remember where they said it was. You could have a look.
No, I think they said it was going to be in Europe. I think they said it alternates every year, and it's going to be in Europe this year and like North America next year. But that's going to be pretty hype. It's going to be one of the 2 locations, and they said it was going to alternate. So,
I mean, that's a good idea as well, because then automatically, if the region that's not in the where it's taking place loses, they have an extra way to cry. You have to give all the nephews and the fucking plebs their little fucking toys and rattles, don't you? Of course, they got to give them something to complain about.
Yeah. So that's us looking forward. I think we covered a lot of the points across all the major leagues this week. We're really just looking forward. I mean, obviously this coming week there's going to be some huge bangers in LPL and LCK with JDG versus Top, and all the games between like Dplus and T1 and KT and GenG. So we have the telecom war and just incredible games all week long. Also, LPL has some other bangers as well. Coming up later this week, we also have Weibo versus BLG. So Saturday is going to be insanely stacked for Asian League of Legends. Really some good matches to catch up on and watch and discuss for next week. We are, guys, back in the swing of things across all of our content on the League of Legends channel right now. All our shows are back up. So Monte and Wolf, Power Spike, Summoning Insight, and Best Time League Show are all either now released if you're watching this this week. So you guys can check it all out. We are going to take a quick break, guys, and when we come back, we'll do some viewer questions.
Right, we're back to take viewer questions, which are, of course, sourced via our Discord, and members with a subscription can submit questions. So what you do is go to the Last Free Nation Discord, sign up for a Discord subscription there. We get a nice revenue cut from it. You help support the channel. And in exchange for that, you can ask a question in the relevant channel, and Monty will pass through them and select the ones that are appropriate to ask.
Which is more likely to happen? Riot become a morally ethical company, or Doublelift using his brain before talking on camera?
I mean, the joke there is, in theory, Doublelift could do it. Like, here's the thing. He's not actually a totally stupid person. It's more to me, like, I think he has extremely bad impulse control. Like, I actually think if he sort of, like, just worked on that aspect a bit, he could probably come off a lot better. The problem with the Riot one is, I know we're just using that as like a joke, but like that's a very serious point. The fact that they never ever fired anyone internally, no one even fell on their own sword, is a terrible precedent for what the company was then going to be like. Because it just said the things we did, we don't actually think are that bad. It's like I always mention about that story where Richard reported that behind the scenes, they told the LEC crew that deal with Neon was totally fine. You just didn't message it the right way. And you should actually have done what you did, which is just like schedule it a few days after Pride to that end, so then people aren't mad, and then do it differently. Like, if you know those two details, what hope do you have for them as a company? Like, for me, that ship sailed. I just know they're evil, so whatever. It's good. It's all.
They didn't fire anybody, and then also when they had a chance to pick a new CEO, they didn't hire anybody from outside the company. They hired another one of the same old boys who knows where all the skeletons are buried, who had been with the company for a decade. Like. You're telling me you can't do some sort of global search that could yield a better CEO than somebody who was with the company in the early days when you didn't have the billions of dollars that you have now? It was slim pickings when in 2010 or whenever, when this guy was hired. You were banking on the future of this game that was far from sure. Now you can get anybody in the world to be CEO of your company. Excellent candidates. I refuse to believe that this internal candidate was the best one that they could have gone with.
Also, I said this in the past, but I'll say it again. I actually really liked Doublelift when Kelby was the puppet master. When Lena is the puppet master, I'm not really a big fan. Why blame the puppet? It's the fucking puppet master that's making it move and talk, mate.
Is banter good for the soul? What difference does it make for people you do or don't have camaraderie with? Of course it's good.
I mean, you know, one of the sickest things about the modern age is all the political correctness has hurt the very people that needed like off-color jokes and naughty jokes and little like inappropriate jokes the most. Like that, the people who do those jokes are people who work in hospitals where people die, people who are at war seeing death every day, people who do the shittest job where you just go and for 9 hours you're at an assembly line like welding something and you can fuck your arm up. They're the people who do stuff like if one of them's from like fucking Jamaica and the other one's from like, I mean, pick any random, put China, then the one from Jamaica's making like stupid inappropriate jokes about the China guy's background and the other one makes that and it's just Raz. You're just fucking giving each other a bit of banter. And in fact, I remember there's a story Alan Moore told where one of his few jobs he had when he was expelled from high school for selling LSD because he was just like the ultimate like fucking delinquent kid basically. He was like smart but he couldn't handle authority, was he had to go because he was from a poor background and work in a place where you just chopped up pigs and you just did stuff like took their organs out. That was his job at like 16. So he told me the only moment and like brief like moment of like light within that dark environment was you'd do stuff like turn to your mate who stood next to you and throw like a pig's testicle at him or something just to fuck with him. And that would sort of make you like, oh, fuck off, stop doing that, I'm busy. And that was the only thing that would raise a bit of levity. So to me, that's what banter does. Like if people haven't noticed, it's actually a concept from the occult if people don't know. Laughter is a form of banishment because when you're laughing at something, there's a levity to it. There's a lightness to it. That means you can't be weighed down in the darker thoughts. That's why, like, the notion is, like, there's a famous saying that says, like, a child's laughter is like banishes the devil or something, you know. If you were the devil, the last thing you want to hear is someone, like an innocent soul, just genuinely enjoying its life. That would be torture to you. That would be nails on a chalkboard. So to me, banter's actually essential. I actually think, without going into a deeper angle on it, that's why the whole whole agenda now is to shut it down, because when you can't banter, you also then, you'll notice, can't do things like satirically point out fucked up things about the world. You can't speak truth to power by being the jester and saying the thing where it's like, oh, he's just joking, or is he? Because the best thing about the comedian is they can say something like a joke and you laugh and you realize, wait a minute, that's just true though. Like, he's actually fucking nailed that. So I actually think that it's actually an essential part of being human.
Yeah. And I also think that it helps, it makes your relationship safer in a lot of ways if you're able to laugh about yourself, if somebody's making fun of you, and cements friendships in many ways. And I think it is absolutely important. I think it's absolutely vital. Here's an interesting one. What do you guys think of the recent news between the PGA and LIV? For those of you who don't know,
it's just Saudi shit as far as I know, right?
So LIV started a competing kind of golf league to the PGA and because they can outspend anybody with the same sovereign wealth fund that bought ESL and Faceit. They really put a crunch onto PGA by trying to get some of the best golfers in the world to commit to their circuit and exclusivity. A lot of golfers and personalities decided to go with the PGA because they sacrificed revenue because they didn't want to necessarily go to LIV. So the question is, it seems like there are many golfers who sacrificed hundreds of millions in potential revenue by staying with the PGA out of loyalty to only have the PGA turn around and express its intent to sell. So what happened, as I understand it, from reading about this, is that the PGA didn't have a lot of choice because the Saudis could basically spend an unlimited amount of money to bury them. And PGA already didn't have the best margins when it came to business. So at the end of the day, basically, there wasn't a choice. They were going to be destroyed by LIV, or they were going to have to join them. And the only way to maintain some of their kind of identity and potential control would be to merge with LIV. Otherwise, they would lose 100% of their control, right? And so I think it was just a really unfortunate decision that they had to make. But that just goes to show what the amount of power and the amount of money that can be thrown around by the Saudi sovereign wealth fund right now. It's really hard to compete when they don't care about losing money.
The problem I have with this topic is I only care about it, like you're saying, from the angle of like, will it give good competition? Does it destroy that? I really hope the person asking is in no way in making any kind of moral judgment, because spoiler, you watch a game owned by the fucking China, the country China. Meanwhile, in CSGO, we watch tournaments run by Saudi Arabia. So like, none of us are in any position to cast moral aspersion. Like, the joke is we're just ahead of them. We're just ahead of them on that one.
I mean, like I've said, I've consulted for the ESL Faceit group entity post Saudi merger. So, I've done that as well. For casters talent looking for career growth opportunities, do you think that more traditional sports would be a good avenue for them to explore? And if so, are there any casters who you think would be well suited to a particular sport based on their skill set? For example, what if Semler cast an F1 race? Well, Sadikist famously was interested in moving into Formula One as kind of a career end game.
He did the online stuff a few times, I think, like the G race.
I mean, he's phenomenally talented. Look, I think right now, the problem with casting traditional sports is I actually think that esports casters, on average, are more skilled than sports casters.
Yes.
I think that because of the nature of esports, in that we have a lot less production. So the burden is on us individually to be more knowledgeable and entertaining, whereas everything's kind of scripted out by highly polished productions within professional sports, especially American professional sports. And I think the problem is that the casters know where all the bodies are buried over multi-decade careers at some of these broadcasters. And so it's virtually impossible to remove them. If you look right now, Joe Buck he casted his first NFL game at 26 years old. There are zero casters in their 20s. I think there may not be very many outside of some professional players who have retired in their 30s who are casters at the moment. The casting, at least in American sports, is ancient. I mean, these casters are very, very old right now. And I think it's actually a mistake that the networks are not aggressively pursuing younger casters. So one of the things that I would consider doing if I was, say, baseball that has a problem with getting younger viewers is say, what style of commentary are younger viewers attracted to? And maybe I would take a flyer on some esports casters to learn baseball and have them kind of inject their personalities into the game. I mean, I think that might be a good way to do things. So
I'll give you a few parallels then, since they wanted specific names. Like for Semler, I would have him do mixed martial arts / the UFC because one, he actually does it in his part time. He does Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then two, Semler's whole style, which I think works really well as the play-by-play in UFC, is he's about fucking hype and he's about getting you into the game. But he's got a lot of technical skill people don't know. Like he's not the guy that actually just like spams the same shit all over again or keeps it monotone. He knows like the up and down. He's a mega experienced caster. People don't know. He's done many different games. So I think Semler would be good for that. For Sado, like you say, it's just obvious. It's just Formula One. It's actually his true passion over esports and people don't know. And he's just a mega technically skilled caster. I would put Pansy on almost any sport. I've always thought she's a mega multi-talent across games. She's just good. She's got a very likable voice, very likable personality. She can do small talk and chit chat. She can do a little bit of analysis. She's just really good caster. I would have Anders do like football / soccer, as in European football. I just think he's got like a mixture of the conversational style for the lower parts of the game. And then for the big moments, Anders is also one of the best at making the iconic call, except unlike League of Legends, he doesn't force it. He doesn't permanently go, I'm going to make the call now. He just lets the call happen, and he's got some of the best calls in history. And then the last one I had was, I would put Atlas from the LCK onto the NBA, because I think this guy is also, he's not only a well-rounded talent, but he's so good at the hype shit. Like his team fight casting is some of the best for me. I think he just does a really good job. And so if one of the styles I like in the NBA is the like super hype style. People know the old commentator Kevin Harlan, the one like right between the eyes. Like I think that's the shit. It's just fucking amazing. Because the thing about a sport like the NBA is I don't need you to describe it. I'm already seeing it. I want you to put the fucking exclamation point on it. That's what that sport is, in my opinion.
Yeah, you want to be clever with your word choice as well, and your play-by-play commentary. And Atlas is certainly quite fluid and clever.
He's got so many clever little puns and word players. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I just don't understand why. What's so crazy to me, Thorin, is that even the rising talent sports pundits. So let's take Mina Kimes, for example, who, I know from her time working in esports when she was like writing that article on Faker for ESPN magazine, and she was like hanging out in Korea with me way before she became as famous as she is right now. And she's done some preseason coverage for the NFL. But if she's if she is a famous ESPN pundit right now that they are really pushing and they have her on all those ESPN shows, why don't they put her on Monday Night Football? Like, this is what I don't understand. She is actually younger, like has a very different vibe, is funny, is clever, knows the game. Like if they can't put her on, they're certainly not going to hire any esports casters. But I do think that in general, esports casters, and I can tell you from here's another thing, guys. I can tell you from my experience of working with people from professional sports. I had a producer of the Super Bowl give me and Doa feedback on our casting from Overwatch League, and he was astounded by how good we were. He was like, "You guys don't even have production. You guys are crushing it." He had virtually no negative feedback for us. So I know that these people really admire our skill sets, and I wish they would take more flyers on some esports people to try and move them into traditional sports, but they will never do that.
I'll just take the abstract and agree with it, because I despise Mina Kimes. I actually think she is fucking pathetic. All she does, if anyone criticizes her, is say it's misogyny or racism for real. You can look this up. She's even accused famous people who said that her take was wrong of that. And also, her takes on the NFL are fucking Reddit nephew tier shit. You can just go and look. She really is the bozo, mate, that's still on that shit of like, he hasn't even got a ring. Like he has a 3-4 record in the play. It's like, what are you talking about? This is like playground shit. So I despise her, mate. I don't care that she's a mate of yours or you met her once. I don't give a fuck. I'm just who I am. Don't give a fuck.
I think she has good on-camera presence, and my point is that if they're not going to give her a shot when they're giving her a million shots at everything right now, then what would it take to get somebody who's under the age of 40 on a sports broadcast? You know what I mean?
They just have to be a woman, be Asian, and then just be willing to fucking do what she does apparently. So there you go. Is there any women Asians that can go on the thing? By that logic, Pansy can do it. There you go. She's not Asian, but she's European. That's enough. That's weird enough for Americans.
I think that they should bring some more younger people onto these broadcasts, and I think esports would be a good place to start. What is the worst book you have ever read? Ooh.
It's going to be... Oh, no, wait a second. I actually think I could probably guess this. Let me think. Because it probably is actually Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. Because one, I had already read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the book he completely plagiarized and just made a mass market airport paperback out of. And secondly, this is the joke. It was the joke back then that comedians said, but they are so right, they nailed it. Dan Brown wrote, because he's such a terrible writer, writing for low IQ cretins, he wrote as if it was a movie. There's like I think it's like a Doug Stanhope bit like this or something. He really does write as if it's just like, and then Tom Hanks, the main character went like, what? This painting has moved. Yes, if the painting, like, it's like the exposition is so childlike. It's just shit, mate. The dialogue is terrible. Like, I remember reading it and just being like, this is like one of the biggest books in the world. Like, it's one of those ones that just makes you think, like, simultaneously, like, what the fuck is humanity going to be? But then what too? I'm basically like an ascended master compared to these fuckers if they're into this shit. So I haven't read many bad books, Monty. I've in general been able to stay clear. I've never read Twilight or any of that shit. But that was an atrocious book, I thought. It was just shit.
Yeah, I would just generally just stop reading a book if I thought it was bad. So it has to be a book that I was forced to read for my literature education, probably. Let me think for a second.
Oh, I'll quickly say there was one other book, which is once I read a bunch of really good sports biographies where they had like a professional writer write it. And then I read like a British football player that was a legend who just wrote his own biography. And it really was like, you know, like a little kid does like an assignment. It was almost like, and then I grew up and I was 7 and I did like my friend. And then we scored goals together. And then I was 8. And when I was 8, I went to school and you're like, holy shit, is this the book? Like, I remember skipping through and going, you know what? Why have I picked someone who just kicks a ball into a net to tell me a story in a book? Like, that was like one of the more... I'd almost deleted that from my brain to be asked that question, so fair play. The biography, I think Robbie Fowler, it was fucking shit. It was absolutely atrocious.
Here's a deep cut for you guys. There was a very bad period of English literature that was kind of these like incredibly shitty Gothic books that took place in like the late 1700s and early 1800s that were like, ooh, really spicy and scandalous at the time. So one of the famous books is a book called The Monk, which is kind of like it's like a soap opera moral corruption of this monk character. You know, with a relationship with a female demon, and like it's ridiculous and completely shit. But it is like a soap opera of that period, and a lot of those gothic novels are just absolute trash garbage. They're like really badly written shock fiction. Really bad. Let's see here. In an interview, I think Reflections, Perks mentioned he had offers from some Korean teams after the G2 Super Teams. Do you ever think we will see a Western player in LCK in the future? Probably not. I don't know why they would do that.
They only give it to the biggest names, and because the biggest name can already get into among the best Western teams, they're just not interested in doing it. You have to remember, this is a bit like what I experienced with Richard. Because Richard never cared about Korean StarCraft, he didn't care about League of Legends particularly. To him, Korea isn't the mecca of esports. He doesn't care about going there. To him, it's just some weird curiosity. And maybe he'd go like once on a holiday, but he doesn't want to live there. It's the same. Like, Doublelift can say all he wants. I don't think Doublelift should ever leave America. I don't think he could live outside of that space, mate. He has to live in the American culture bubble. Mate, I thought Bjergsen could have done it just because how he stuck it out in TSM all those years, but obviously he wasn't interested. I just don't think anyone's going to do it, mate. And I also, by the way, don't think they'd be able to hack it. I think they would mentally break down if they play in LCK or LPL. I think it'd be really stressful to play in that league.
Yeah, I think it's just the integration with the team and the communication would be really difficult. So
the idea makes me horny as fuck. I can't lie. It sounds hype as fuck, but I just don't think practically it's going to happen.
Yeah, unless they already speak Korean, I don't think it's going to happen. Why do humble goats have the most cancerous fan bases like Messi, Curry, Faker, Federer, Tens, Reckless, Nemesis? So like basically why do humble professional players who are very famous have very rabid fan bases?
I mean, I'll just say I personally don't think Messi even is that humble, but whatever. You've almost given yourself away there, question asking. Some of the other ones are like Federer's quite classy, he's still arrogant in his own way, but he's quite classy. He'll give it up to people he loses to. Because the problem is not to do with the player. Almost any GOAT candidate, it's actually about nephews. Here's the thing. It used to be like annoying back in the day. But believe it or not, when Michael Jordan was around in the 90s, you could actually have all these takes. Like someone could say, I thought Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the greatest. I preferred Magic Johnson. What about Larry Bird? Well, I thought Wiltshire. These were all legit takes. The problem with nephews, I've always made this point, is they are the 16-year-old kid who just found out about punk music and bought a Ramones t-shirt. But they've only heard 1.5 albums. But because they have no identity and they're grasping for one, they make the fact that they like the Ramones everything, and therefore to strengthen their own identity, everyone who likes anything not the Ramones or punk music is an idiot, a loser, and is wrong. So you'll notice every single argument among nephews about GOATs goes like this. My player is the obvious GOAT. It's not disputable. End of conversation. That's how you know they're an idiot. There's that famous saying, like, wise men argue cases, fools decide them. I've always said, I don't think any sport, even ice hockey, I don't care who that makes mad. I don't think any sport actually has an undisputed GOAT. Because, for example, in all sports, there's different roles as well, isn't there? There's different positions. Like, I'll give you an example. Here's one I'd throw right out there now. So, okay, in theory, goal scorer and passer, like Gretzky, is the best position in hockey, right? I'll tell you what, if you've ever seen him play, Dominik Hasek, the fucking goalkeeper, was unbelievable. Supposedly in practice, for real, he could just have whole sessions where no one ever scored against him. That's how nuts this guy was. So you put him on the best team, who the fuck knows what it does to the sport? Maybe you just have teams where it doesn't matter how good the player is. So to me, I prefer to argue the cases. I prefer to hear your reasons why. To me, you're just looking for a second dad when you go, this guy has 6 rings, so you can't even debate it, or you are a hater. It's like, you're the hater, bro. You hate discussion.
Well, it's also interesting to see how that kind of identity formation has changed over time. So, for example, Thorin, when you and I were growing up, musical genre informed a lot of teenage identity, whether you were into metal or a punk, or you were a Gen X and grew up with grunge and, alternative rock. And so high school was almost, a lot of high school was divided by cliques that were about musical song selection. But basically, it was because it was a way to be edgy, right? That's when punk was edgy, or when grunge was edgy, or when metal was edgy, or rave culture, for example, right? But nobody gives a shit about there. Like, liking genres of music is no longer edgy because we all grew up with those genres of music and we realized it wasn't devil worship or going to corrupt the youth or whatever bullshit people thought at the time. So people have had to find a new kind of way to attach their identities to things, and it has become like things like, I guess, K-pop is music, but it's more of a subculture, or streamers that you like, right? Or kind of like social media personalities is the way that people do it these days. So I think a lot of those more like identity-seeking young individuals are attaching themselves to streamers or famous esports players and then viciously defending them instead of the Ramones, to your example.
Bad thing is about that, no matter what you think of great bands, etc., you can have different genres you like, but these streamers are the most low IQ morons I've ever seen, mate. Like, I will admit, I haven't watched whatever the best of their content is. I mainly saw a lot of them through the lens of that walkout thing. The Ludwig guy, the Moist Critical guy, these guys are fucking knuckle draggers. Hassan, I already knew this guy was a cretin with some of the past things he said. These guys are so stupid, it's almost baffling how dumb they are. Like, their takes are dog shit. I get it's like you just love their personality, and again, they're your new replacement dad because your real dad is off doing some other fucking office job. But fucking hell, like, the nephews are in so much trouble. That's why in some ways what we do actually is like a fucking service act to the community, isn't it? We're trying to like elevate and make them aspire to more.
Yeah. Next question is, I bought a freeze pipe and gifted it to my friend, even though I don't smoke. I bought Richard's Substack, subbed to the Discord channel, bought Liquid IV. You guys are literally the highlight of my commute every week. Not trying to be a shill, but can you guys make merch so I can support you even more? Don't know what I would do on my long drives without you. Thanks again for the years of great content. Thank you very much for the nice message and your support. That really helps.
Yes.
We do want to make merch. We actually did make merch and bring it to our San Francisco event and give it out for free to people at that event. But we do want to do merch. We want to do it in a quality that will be good, and also figure out, I think our problem too is that we need to make sure we have international distribution for you guys, because we need to at least cover North America and Europe simultaneously. And that is just, we've got bigger battles to fight, unfortunately, right now with the company, and we will get there. We will get there.
Here's the thing, when we have merch though, here's why our merch will be better than anyone else's. Because I already know for the ones I want to do what I want to do. Just like my articles, I'm going to get those dope ass fucking community artists that I've worked with. And I'm just going to, like the Rin Hallward and fucking the Nicolas Choisseau, the guy, the French guy. I'm just going to get those guys, and I'm going to have them and a Tantalus. They're going to make the fucking artwork. It'll be our concept. They'll do the design and they'll get a cut of the profits too. I want it to be like that. I think it'd be dope.
Yep. Yeah, we do need to, that's just a massive project, guys. And one that, we need to make sure that the core business of the company is humming along, and then we can start to tackle some of these more complicated
all I'm saying is, products. Any Twitch Primes in the chat for us?
There you go. To tack on to the above, any update on my request for LFN shot glasses to proudly toast esports delenda est? That would be a great shot glass.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good idea.
Like Gothic script or something around that.
With VCD Masters happening in Japan, a predominantly console FGC leaning country, how big is it that they have adopted Valorant as hard as they have? Well, it's not that weird when you consider that PC gaming has been on the rise in Japan, and Apex Legends has also been really big in Japan. They have one of the largest player bases as it stands. So, yeah, I think that we are just seeing a shift towards more PC FPS play in Japan in general. So I don't think it's that surprising that Valorant, as a newer FPS, has found success there.
Right, one, shout out to the primes in the chat. And then two,
very nice.
Also, I will say there's an episode we did with Nymera. It might even have been his first ever one. If you go back to like last year, it was 2021, I think. When we did that episode with Nymera, he talked about this a little bit, because basically the old scenario in Japan used to be something crazy. Like you couldn't win money from playing tournaments because that was considered like almost like what you'd won from gambling or something weird. And so they couldn't really have a true pro scene. In fact, I think back then they would do silly things like you'd win the arcade machine if you won like the Street Fighter competition or a PC or something weird. So as far as I know, they've lifted that and like released some of the restraints because they're a very conservative country. And now you can have pro gaming. And so the silliest thing of all time to me was like, listen, I get that like Korea's this weird thing because it's a mixture of like, it's like America props them up and then they've got the Asian aspect. But Japan always should have been some hardcore country. They always should have been in on games like Counter-Strike, League of Legends. You would have thought they'd have been going crazy because of the anime otaku culture, right? So to me, I think now they're unleashed and they get a chance to play. So it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're just going to see more and more of it too. It's just, I think PCs have become more accessible in Japan, which was previously like a console first culture.
Yeah, they're also an arcade place as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, also thanks to Jerky's Minion for all those gifted subs. That's very nice of you. Thanks for being such a great fan as usual. Who do you think were scrimming each other before the final week of MSI? I've heard the talk of the scrim meta early on in a tournament where teams are often scrimming people that are from their region, but on opposite sides of the bracket, but not during the later stages of the same tourney. So typically what happens is, especially for MSI, is that you have teams in that region that are actively scrimming, but who are not participating in MSI. So I would imagine those scrim partners were just some of the LEC teams that were kicking around and trying to get extra practice during that period. They could have also not scrimmed. Obviously for Worlds, there usually are not scrims or very effective scrims during the final couple weeks of Worlds because most teams are just off, right? In Asia, it usually is the best because there's usually some Asian teams that'll continue scrimming through Worlds that are no longer in the tournament or who never were at the tournament in the first place. But generally, the deeper you go into an international event, the less meaningful practice there is for teams. But it's better at MSI, typically, because the next split is coming up so soon. And you also know that there's not going to be potentially a massive meta shift like they do after Worlds every year, so your practice might mean something. So I would imagine that they were not scrimming very much, or it was just some random LEC teams. In order to make the meta more diverse, should Riot implement fearless draft in all competitions? No, guys, we don't know. It's good for up and coming teams. It's not good for professional teams. I don't think Fearless Draft is the way forward. You are trying to solve a problem of bad game design by implementing competitive formats. I think they should balance the game better. Or, as this person suggests, rotating certain champions in and out at the beginning of each split. You could do champion pools. We've talked about that at length. Fearless Draft, we already have a problem in League of Legends, guys, where you can ban players' best champions, so we never get to see them play their best champions. And so now it gets limited even further, where if we get to see a player on their best champion, they can't play it anymore. It's like you guys hate watching the pinnacle of play because you want more champions. You want artificial diversity, right? No.
Think about this. Imagine a 5-game series where the first 4 times a top laner who only has 4 champions has played those 4 champions. And then, as Monty says, for 5th game, we just ban whatever you had left. So now your top laner is playing like his 8th best champion. It's the 5th game, the most important game, the one that everyone's going to remember. Would that be a great game of League of Legends? It'd be inarguably a much shitter game of League of Legends, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's like you guys want to watch worse league. The problem comes from the balance, guys. It doesn't come from the professional players. I don't understand what this next question means, so maybe you can clarify this one. User, it says, can you recall a time where you failed to coach or manipulate the answer you wanted from someone publicly or privately? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to get out of that.
I mean, it's the problem with that is I think he actually means it just as in we're really good interviewers and we couldn't get something out of them, but he made it sound like we're pieces of shit. So I think we might just read that one. You know what I mean?
I don't
reformulate it and ask it again in a nice way.
I don't typically try and manipulate people's answers. So because I'm actually curious what their honest answers are.
What they don't get is this. I research these people and know these people. So I sometimes know better than them what they want to say. And I just try to help them. If they don't say it at the end of the day, that's up to them. Maybe they didn't really think that. Or, as is sadly often the case, which is annoying since you guys worship interviews, sometimes players privately tell me A and then publicly say not A. And even if afterwards I go, but I thought you thought A, I do. I just wanted to say not A. That's the fucking nightmare of being, this is why being a journalist, Richard Lewis always says this, it will drive you crazy if you let it, because you've got the curse of Cassandra. You know what's happening, so you tell people, but you never believe till afterwards. And then afterwards, everyone memory holes it and says they always thought that all along. They always knew the walkout didn't make sense. And of course, the LCS is overpaid.
And you're a piece of shit at all times.
And also, you're just a piece of shit at all times in all scenarios. Everything you do just makes you a piece of shit. You're not even allowed on a free bird app to block people. Otherwise, you're a piece of shit automatically. They're obliged to be able to follow you and reply to you.
As a fan that wants my favorite esports orgs to actually earn money and for the whole industry to not die, what would you say is the best way to consistently support them and what gives them the biggest cut? Is it merch, subscribing on Twitch, or buying stuff from sponsors? If they have a code, buying stuff on sponsors is good. If it's just buying stuff from sponsors, there's no way to tie it to you, that you were supporting the team, so probably not the best way. Merchandise is often very good for teams. Merchandise is often very good.
I mean, I would say there are some very simple free ones. Like you like the tweet, you leave a comment on the YouTube video, you thumbs up.
Yes.
You retweet it if it's an awesome piece of content on Twitter. There's simple things that you can do too.
Yep. Honestly, like tweeting at the sponsors and telling them that you like that they're sponsoring it, they see that. And they do put some amount of weight in that.
Yeah, they consider that organic fucking like feedback. So they will actually really appreciate that, especially if you do it in a way that obviously wasn't coordinated by the team and you're just doing it off your own account. Yeah.
After watching Thorin's latest thoughts on the coaching narratives that exist, what are some other existing ideas or narratives that you would really like to delete out of people's minds, and which non-existing / unpopular narratives would you like to see do well?
I'll basically give you the very quick premise. The premise was that when everyone talks about how this draft is obviously moronic and stupid and why didn't they pick this and why did they pick this, it's like my premise is from now on, I'm taking the premise that top coaches aren't idiots. Mac is not an idiot. Peter Dunn is not an idiot. Youngbuck is not an idiot. So when I actually fucking Reapered, so when they do a weird pick that I don't agree with, I might not agree with it, but I'm going to assume Scrim's informed that, the players' choices informed that, the meta in NA informed that. So essentially that's like the baseline I was setting. So I'm kind of like chopping away at that. So what are some that annoy you?
I mean, the classic one that we have to reset a double elimination bracket, that annoys me. I agree with your one about coaching though, because you can never know, especially with coaching with picks, like they might actually just have to pander to a player, because if they don't do what the player wants, then the player tilts and ruins the game anyway. So you have to take
they're never going to admit that to you, obviously.
Yeah, you have to use a suboptimal strategy because you realize that the optimal strategy is going to increase your chances of losing versus the suboptimal strategy. Like, coaching is as much about people management as it is about getting really good strategic drafts, right? And trying to combat the emotions of your players. I would also say just a lot of the narratives that go around that where people pretend, to your journalism point, that we don't know what we're talking about. If we say something, we probably have additional information that is informing our opinions that perhaps you guys should kind of listen to and just take in trust when we're talking about player performance or attitudes or these kind of things, rather than just taking what the players say on social media as absolute gospel, as if they don't have a motivation to present themselves in a certain way that may be entirely untrue. You know, maybe we know some things.
We're no nemesis in the LEC anymore, isn't it? Who knew?
I'm from the UK and I'm visiting Korea this summer. Is it possible to attend the LCK as a foreigner? I mean, I see people in the audience 100%. Who are foreigners. I've read online that to get tickets on the Lowell Park website, you need a Korean social security number. I've never been to Lowell Park, guys. I've never been there. So I don't know. And if I were to go there, I would just talk to the casters who would get me in, who are friends of mine, right? So I would say, I don't know. I am the wrong person to ask. Why don't you tweet at Valdez, Chronicler, Wolf, and Atlas and say, how do I do this? Because I don't know. I've never done it. And I'm never going to have to do it. So one of my favorite classic SI moments happened on the episode with Froggen, where you're describing Amazing versus Lulex jungle matchups as dogs humping in the park. What are your most favorite classic memorable moments from Summoning Insight?
I mean, the classic one's obviously the Forgiven. You either like so fucking whatever, you either win or suck a cock or something. Like, yeah. Okay. That was an interesting one, certainly. That was out there. Oh, there's obviously the one I referenced on the last episode with Edward, where Monte basically had to learn the hard way that like some of the shit they were doing was like idiot savant shit in M5 and wasn't actually genius, unfortunately. Which, look, it's prime fucking marquee viewing, but it was pretty wild, wasn't it? I know. Oh,
I mean, so many Loco Doco moments.
On the 200th episode, when we found out that the Pringles sponsorship was fake all along. That's pretty good.
That was great.
Oh, there's loads of Loco Doco ones. Like, I even had one where I didn't get to bring it up to him on the show, but on the first episode we had with Loco Doco, there was that one where I can't remember what the fucking premise of it was. I can't remember what the initial joke came from, but it was that one where there was a name of a player in the game, and it was like somehow it was like, I think it was like maybe a Chinese player, and in their name was like Young, because obviously, like, you know, a lot of Korean, and I was like, Young, oh, like, yeah, like you with young girls, like all those girls that you're dating, Loco or whatever. And he got really shy because Loco was ridiculous for going for fangirls and also, and like the makeup woman and stuff. And so as a result, even though in the moment it was really funny, because obviously he got all I'll tell you is after the show, because he won't mind me saying this now, it's like fucking 9 years later, he did after the show get a bit slightly annoyed and just say like, look, you can like banter and stuff, but like, don't say things like that about me privately though. Something like that, which is like the most, yeah, Loco could do that. So every now and then he'd just get really earnest. You're like, nah, bloody hell, I feel bad now, whatever. So that just always makes me laugh when I think of it, because I basically just straight roasted him to his face.
There was never a shot Loco didn't shoot. Credit to him. Yeah, he always took his shot, man.
And even though I made fun of him on Listen Loco, by the way, you're all going to think, yeah, he's just some skinny little nerd. He was mega successful at getting women, at least initially. Dude, he has hooked up with so many, and some of them were dime pieces, I'm telling you.
Yeah, he did take a shotgun approach, so, you know, it does increase success if you just take your shot.
He definitely wasn't a forever alone nerd, though. Don't believe any of that shit. Yeah. No way. He's actually, by the way, a really good person to have in your group if you want to go out on like a night on K-Town or something. He's the guy. He's one of those like social people you want in your group that knows everyone.
Sure, agreed.
What about some other moments? Let's do a couple more moments. Is there any more?
I mean, I feel like the Expeke episode was pretty funny. The
one where he was putting on like the fucking thing. It wasn't Zoom back then, but he had that thing where he had like a pirate mask on or some weird shit like that at one point.
Just random shit that was happening, and that one was pretty funny.
I also do think he missed it because he was talking about the one with Froggen. The one in the Froggen one where we talk about high style of roaming, and Froggen's like, it can't even comprehend it because he's like, but you just lost 14 minions to go and get that way because that's who Frog it is. In many ways, it was the ultimate dissection of the two different diverging playing styles.
I think your description of Dyrus taking the last helicopter out of Vietnam is one of my favorite analogies you made.
Okay.
How close are the current LPL ADCs to contend with Uzi for the GOAT title?
I mean, the problem with that topic is you all already, only because he won Worlds, allow Deft in that conversation. So, by the way, Uzi hasn't even won the Worlds. So I don't even know how your accomplishment ring counters even fucking calculate that one, by the way. But okay. So to me, I think the greatest of all time are between Uzi, Deft, and Ruler. These are the obvious ones at this point in time because of longevity, success, how excellent they were, the metas. So Ruler plays in the LPL. I actually think Ruler, by the way, is making a better and better case. And by the way, he already won Worlds on fairly scuffed team. Like, I think you can make a case for all three, in my opinion. They're all mega.
Yeah. And yeah, Ruler now also, has the LPL title in his first split. So it's interesting because all of the great ADCs that you mentioned have also played on the LPL now, which is fun.
And I'll say this as well, even though he has his int moments, Jackie Love now might be underrated, mate. He is still, like, if you want to see someone who can show you the ultimate skill expression of that role, he's fucking amazing at that. He plays right on the edge.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
With Uzi returning, are there examples of elite esports players that took prolonged breaks from the game like Uzi and then came back and were just as nearly dominant as before they took the break? So he's asking for you, I guess, as the esports historian, if there's a player that took a long break and came back and continued their dominance.
I don't think they dominated. There was people who came back and were good, but usually when you quit like that, you're just done forever. So I don't think anyone ever went like years like he did.
Do we count Flash going to StarCraft 2 as a break from StarCraft Brood War now that he's back in Brood War?
I mean, the problem with that, it's not the same scene though, is it? It's not like the MSL, OSL scene. And also StarCraft 2, he was going hard as fuck, still in a pro team and stuff. That's the thing. When they say like take a break like that, I'd really struggle. Like even in Counter-Strike, I don't think it's really happened before. Nah, I don't think so. I'm going to say no. Because they said to be dominant. If you just said to be good again, it's happened a bunch of times, yeah.
Have you successfully learned a foreign language? How would you go about it? Well, my French is okay. And I just learned French in high school, and French is easy. And I also took Latin in college, which helps a lot with Romance languages like French. Immersion, obviously, very good for learning foreign languages. I can get around Korea just fine. I didn't have the time to really learn Korean, partially because of the difficulty, but I would have to really dedicate myself to taking like college classes. And I know some of the current LCK casters have done like the 4-hour daily Korean classes. I couldn't do that because I was running a team and doing Summoning Insight and, coaching CLG while I was in Korea, and I was also casting 5 days a week. So it was really, really fucking hard for me to have half a day to go do that and still keep up with everything else in my work. So I didn't take that opportunity when I had it, but I would just use, if I were to go to Korea and have more time, or have been there longer, doing those 5 days a week, 3 hours, 4 hours a day, plus being immersion really does help. But the best way to do it is just to learn Korean like Wolf did, which is just by struggling through and dating. That's how he became fluent in Korean.
I mean, I have never learned a foreign language. The joke would be I learned American, but actually that ruined me because now sometimes I even think to myself and say it in private company with no Americans present, elevator, garbage. I don't even say the real fucking words, which is actually criminal. And I even tell people around me, please correct me on that. I want to actually get back to speaking English. So that
he started spelling color without a U. It's a total disaster. And
then the other thing is, so since I haven't learned one fluently, just ignore this as like pro advice, but I would say from observing and doing like I've done a little bit of languages. To me, the biggest thing you need to do is don't ever like try to do it like a mathematical equation where you're trying to be perfect. What you do is you just go, you talk as much as you can to people who speak that language, and you just use whatever words come to mind. And you don't think, you just let, because you don't think when you say something in English, you have the idea and then the words come out. That's how you got to do it. So even though you're going to have a limited vocabulary initially, it's going to be way better because you're going to find, you're going to know like, oh, like, and you're going to know how to say thank you and please and more. Do that automatically. And then the other thing is, don't ever be afraid to make a mistake because they're going to try to understand you. When someone comes to you and speaks in broken English, excuse me, I know car now here this time. Like if you're in a parking lot and the machine with a coin, you can guess what they're saying. You don't go, that doesn't even make grammatical sense what you're saying there. I won't speak to you in English. You try to make the gap up. So people will do that for you, especially by the way, if you're in certain countries like Spain or something, they think it's cool that you're trying to speak their language. France might be the rare exception because famously they actually are very arrogant to English people if they don't know French and you say a little bit and you say it wrong. That's just a cultural clash essentially. But I would just say that, like, don't be scared to try. Basically, you have to. It's like starting to play StarCraft on the ladder. You're gonna be shit at the beginning. You got to grind a bit till you get good.
Yeah, it really is. And also it's just a matter of like being willing to go out there and make mistakes. That's how you learn languages. You just have to continue to practice even if you're not good at it. Favorite sports commentators?
I just gave you one. Kevin Harlan, that was one. Who else? I always did think Marv Albert was very good. He's just the ultimate pro, isn't he? He can do that thing where he can phone in the shit game like no one else can. But you could tell sometimes he didn't give a fuck about some of these mediocre. He's just a pro. If you like British soccer, I do think that John Motson is one of the best of all time. He's a really fucking amazing commentator. He's one of my fans. Who else? Who would you put in the mix?
I really like Al Michaels for his flexibility across various different sports and his longevity. He's also just very funny. I think he has a very like dry sense of humor at times that I really enjoy. I know a lot of NFL fans don't like him, but I really love Chris Collinsworth. I think that people don't like him because
he's good.
Here's what people hate about him. They think he's like a Tom Brady or like a Patrick Mahomes homer, but he just loves excellent gameplay.
He loves all quarterbacks as well. Come on, he loves them all, man.
Yeah, he gets
that
really.
Is a guy that can take the ball out and throw the weak side pass. It's like,
well, and his like Trump's like
that style,
that's some play. Like he says, like that's some quarterback. That's some play. But what I love about him is the same reason I like Semler, where like his love of the game is really infectious. And he just appreciates he appreciates greatness and he gets really excited. And I think he's excellent at breaking down plays as well. So I do like Chris Collinsworth a lot. I know some people don't like him because they feel like he's too superlative with the praise at times. But he's my favorite NFL colorcaster, and I'm actually sad that he's no longer paired with Al Michaels.
Oh, I forgot, because I was only thinking of play-by-plays there. My favourite colour commentator, this is mad edgy, people hate this guy because they're all stupid nephews who have to dismiss the past in order to make their own ego feel fine. I think QB Brown, a really legendary basketball figure and used to even be a coach, he is like the Yoda of fucking basketball. He just knows everything. He has like an amazing read. He's watched every era of the game. I think that guy was fucking amazing when he was a colour commentator.
If Monty's child became a League of Legends player for TSM and Thorin's child became a CSGO player for Astralis, how would you guys react? Assume that Reggie and Nikolai Nyholm are still at their respective orgs. Would this be a Return of the Jedi situation where Luke redeems Vader's, but the roles are reversed? Or a Force Awakens situation where Han is unable to redeem Kylo Ren?
Have you noticed, Monty, this has been a classic take for 10 years now. Do you remember the take when Flame was coming to LCS? When they go, imagine if he joins TSM. It's like, why would I hate that? Like what? You do realize I don't like these people because they're bad human beings. They're shitheads and arseholes. I don't just dislike them like you do because you just hate fans of the other guy. You're thinking this is on a totally different level. Like, spoiler, I wouldn't allow my child, if he had taken my advice, to join Astralis. I would tell them they're a fucking abusive and exploitative organization who have done these documented bad things. This isn't, by the way, this is also why I hate questions like this. You think that's funny? How about this? What about if your worst enemy fucked your mother's face tonight? How would you feel about that? Would you get upset? Get upset performatively for me now so I can see you get upset and then go, ha, he He's triggered. What's the point in that question? What is the point in the question for real? It's a shit question. There you go.
I think there are certain advantages though, like knowing what I know about Reggie and TSM. I'm pretty confident that I could stop the things from happening that were happening. Also, there is something sweet about there is some sweet revenge in taking these people's money or having your family take these people's money. I mean, I think I could negotiate very effectively with TSM on behalf of my child as a result of knowing what I know, and I could set certain guide like rails within the contract about treatment that could solve a lot of the issues. So
I'll also just say this. I think that just shows what a fucked perception you have of family. Like, I'll tell you right now, there's a story you might not know, Monty, and no one else ever mentions this detail. They just act like this player is crazy and an idiot. So I don't know if you know this, but Scottie Pippen, believe it or not, the last year or so came out in a bunch of interviews and was really rude about Michael Jordan and said he's a terrible teammate, he's overrated, like I was better than him, and he's a piece of shit. Do you know what they don't ever mention as a detail that might make that suddenly seem more reasonable? Right, apparently Michael Jordan's son is fucking Scottie Pippen's former wife and the mother of his children. They don't even bother to mention that because they think he just doesn't understand about basketball. Here's my problem with that. Scottie Pippen is from the old school of sports, where what you do in the locker room stays in the locker room. And in that scenario, in Scottie Pippen's mind, I'll speculate, but this is what I believe as well, Michael Jordan, when he even hears that's happening, is supposed to go, bro, look, first of all, that's just silly anyway. She's way older than you. This isn't something that can have like longevity and it can't really go anywhere. And secondly, that's a brother of mine. That's a teammate of mine. Like, pick anyone else in the world, mate, but not like not the 15 wives of the teammates I had or something, you know, like essentially, why are you doing that? Like, are you just doing it to be edgy, to be an arsehole? Like, that's the angle I have on that one. So basically, in that scenario, my kid wouldn't do that, mate. I wouldn't have fucking neglected him for a million years and just given him Nintendo every Christmas. So he actually would listen to what I have to say, and I'd just guide him in life, wouldn't I?
Is it better for you guys to split content to different channels rather than putting it on one? Yes, because like if you want Counter-Strike content, you can go to our Counter-Strike channel and subscribe to that one. And if you want League channel content, you can go to the League channel and subscribe to that one. So, and you can subscribe to neither or both of them or whichever one you prefer. And we're not spamming you with a bunch of shit from games that you guys don't care about or content that you guys don't care about. I think it would be, and also we frankly at this point in time just have too much content coming out. The YouTube algorithm would be very angry if we were to post like three-hour videos on the same day. That's just a bad plan.
If I could go back in time, I wouldn't have done my channel the way I did it, because it meant that inherently, with the way the algorithm became the main thing, not the subscriptions box, everyone who only likes League never clicks on the CSGO video. So that tells them, oh, it's not really a user that cares about your shit. Stop showing them videos. Everyone who only cares about CSGO doesn't want to see all this League shit. So I did it at the time because that was a very different era when people went in the subs box. And so I was just getting all the viewership and all the subs. And spoiler, there's a reason I've never been allowed to get more subs for about 6 years now. There's another thing, they lock the account. So if I could go back, I would have made separate channels for each of the big games, and I'm pretty sure it would make them way more successful. It's why in some ways the way I've done that is do this company and give some of the content to this company, so it sort of in the end worked itself out. And I mainly just use my channel now to get my own thoughts out, literally and metaphorically.
Yep. So what guest/topics do you think have historically made the most rewatchable episodes of SI?
Anyone who's a cerebral player, basically, like people like N-Rated or Dom's a pretty good one. LS has got some classic episodes. Or even Loco would often come with his own unique angles or some info he had from the Korean scene. A lot. By the way, this is one of the things I had to teach Dom, but he learned it eventually, mate. When we used to do the Crackdown, I can tell you, he only wanted the biggest name players that we could get all the time. Now, luckily, I'm a really good show booker, so I got him Perks and Caps and Yankos and all these fucking mega people. But what he had to learn eventually is, one, they can't be available every week, and sometimes they're really hard to book. So sometimes you ended up with some guy who's ADC who's played 3 splits in LCS, a top laner who's been subbed in, who's just having a couple of good games, and that player might end up being shit. So what I had to teach him was, the reason you have personalities and coaches on, even if the viewership sometimes is lower, it's because the convo is going to be way better. They're able to engage on a level that the others can't, and when they watch other regions, they can just be like you, another analyst watching the LCK and tell you what they think of that. By the way, there you go, I've just thought of one there, Peter Dunn. Fucking banger every time. Sadly, actually, Bwippo was a good guest before he decided to sell Checks notes, me and everyone gain career out to T1 fans. So he can't come on these shows anymore. Get fucked. Oh, by the way, you can go through all the classics. If you could understand her, Kelsey was super insightful.
Yep.
Even though it's edgy now, Froscoring was fucking exciting to have on the show. You never knew where it was going to go. Yeah, there's some Papa Smithy, always good conversations about the meta. And also he just does that thing where he 24/7 plays devil advocate for every fucking person in the org because he's in the org now. But whatever, he does a good job at it. He goes to good defense.
What's the best esports catchphrase, such as Richard's "What about today, dickhead"? That's pretty good.
What is the best catchphrase? I mean, obviously, Anders is pretty good. Like, are you kidding me? It's a pretty classic one because essentially any outrageously super skilled moment, that is what you think. Like, what the fuck? That's a pretty good one, I think.
None are popping up right now that I can really.
I do not
really
believe that.
Where on the list of things? Lots of people asking about merch. Where on the list of things to do is Elephant's merch? Low
Bottom.
Right now.
By the way, that's why when you guys
it's good to know that you guys want it, though.
When you guys say shit like, oh, if you sign Fallen or Doublelift, you'll sell so many t-shirts, you are the biggest pleb of all time. You are telling on yourself that you know nothing about the industry. What you'll actually make is like, after all the costs and shipping, you'll make like $10,000. But the amount of hours it took just wasn't even worth it. Like, it'll never come close to touching the sides. Merch is just not a thing at the moment.
Yeah, I actually don't even know. I know some of you guys are really hot for the merch, but I actually have no idea how much we would actually sell. So we'd have to pretty carefully do that. What is your favorite type of a narrator in fiction? For example, omniscient third person, unreliable first person. I don't really care because it just depends on the rest of the work. So doesn't bother me. It could be anything as long as the relationship between the narrator and the rest of the work of fiction is functional.
Just depends how good it is, like you say.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite.
Tobacco products. If people don't know, I'm assuming this is more like, it's more like a third person telling you their thoughts. I actually thought the way it was done in the Hyperion books was fucking banging, where you sort of did get like their perspective, but it was like told still from like a narrator style. I thought that was very well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. Tobacco products you like: cigars, occasional cigarettes, chew, pipe tobacco. Chew is gross. Cigarettes when I'm drinking, great. Cigars, good. Pipe tobacco actually smells amazing. I think pipe tobacco is the most pleasurable. The act of like smoking a pipe is very cathartic, I think, and it both tastes and smells wonderful.
I despise tobacco, so no answer for me.
There you go. Does League have a super skilled but petty self-destructive breadhead? I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
That's because Nico used to have a haircut where it was like shaved on the side, but on the top. So I called him like breadhead, basically. So they're asking, is there a player like Nico, basically? And there's worse ones. I mean, they had Forgiven for a start off. Like, this is not a joke. If I could pilot Forgiven's brain, he would have been one of the best League of Legends players of all time. Do you notice how I didn't insert the word Western or European there? He would have been one of the best League of Legends players of all time. He was unbelievably good at the game. But he was just a fucking dickhead as a person. And he just had a lot of personality issues due to things in his past, as far as I know.
When was Faker's last superstar carry year? Well, I mean, he was first team All-Pro. We can argue that last split. He was really good in spring, guys. He was really good. It was his best year probably since like 2017. But if we're talking about when was the apex of Faker, probably, 2013 to 2017. Was really when he was just insanely talented and like obviously the best, but he really has been doing very well recently.
The joke is, if you're like, oh, you're just a fake here. No, it's the other way around. Why would he still be the best 10 years later, you idiot? It's not hockey, you know. Like, esports is way more fleeting with your prime.
What's the best team you could construct from players that are hated by some large sections of the community? I actually don't know who they like and who they hate.
Well, here's the joke. Like, sadly, I wouldn't put them on the same team now, but believe it or not, Perks and Upset are absurdly hated by Reddit, Monty. It's mental.
Really?
Like, their logic for real is that the reason Upset's never won is he's just not good enough. So by their logic for real, Flackhead is better. That was a real take last year. The Flathead is better than Upset. Then for Perks, I made this point on the last Best Damn League show, so I've only made it once. You might appreciate it, actually. What they do with Perks is this. The people who hate him on Reddit never knew his game like the Chovy haters. You know, when the Chovy haters all come out and the player they describe was never Chovy, it's like, bro, he was always the lane focused guy. He was always the guy about CS. He was always the guy that'd do the side lane. Like, he was never the guy where it was like, I solo kill you and then go and have the most insane team fights ever. Like, he was good at some of those things, but that wasn't ever his game. So in the same way, they talk about Perks for real, as though unless he's a god in lane, he's worthless. Which is like, you don't know Perks then. I mean, Monty said it earlier. Perks' whole game is sort of like side lane really, really well because he understands map pressure. And then in team fights do pretty well. And then I would say pull off like a clutch flank every now and then and do like go for that crazy angle when everyone else would just back off. That might win you the game. So there's two examples of players. Let me think who else they really hate. By the way, they also hate Alfari, but I guess he's another Vitality player, so it's not so great for now. Who else do they hate? I mean, I would say in general they hate Larson because, again, like Froggen, they can't see what he's doing. By the way, I think Froggen was fairly hated on. Dude, people for real act like after season 2 he was shit. I'll tell you, go back and watch when he was in that Golden Guardians lineup. Mate, it's ridiculous. He was actually, for real, just like one of the best mids in the league still. And he was doing stuff, by the way, that no one else in the world could do, Monty. He would play like Vel'Koz and just win lane and not get ganked. Good luck trying that in LCS, by the way. You know, the mobility of that champion is non-existent. And they also, for real, acted Monty like he was under his tower the whole game. If you ask any pro, the thing about Froggen, they say to this day, if you play him in solo queue, is he's amazing in lane at trading and stopping you from being able to get the CS and always getting more CS and you can't harass him. Like, so Froggen's one. There's a bunch of players, mate. Forgiven used to be mega hated because he never won. He was all into semis. I'm trying to think for the other roles, though. I mean, believe it or not.
Weirdly hated.
It is, I know. I think it's just because he's also, like, he is inherently a very cocky guy. But to me, it's like Federer. It's like, mate, you can back it up. You can be cocky if you want. Like, you are fucking unbelievable.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this old by the numbers question. Who in LFN would last the longest in a death match with a bear? I don't know. I think we'd all get owned pretty fast.
Oh, all of the people in LFN. Let me think. I mean, the joke is Dom, because in theory, people on crack don't like seem to feel pain and they can just keep going. And it's almost like that movie Crank. They just fucking, so he'd fucking tear that bear up, mate. The joke is, unless
Semmler's the biggest one.
He hasn't got a chance. Oh, Semmler's actually really tall and also literally does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he actually probably could murk the bear with like rear naked choke or something, you know.
He's also like just a big guy.
And the joke is he spent his whole career wrestling for the mic with Anders, so think about it. Think about the theme. There you go. There's a freebie for you.
That's funny. With Dota 2 becoming more user-friendly over the years, I'm noticing that certain aspects of the game, draft diversity, formats, impactful game updates, more kills per minute, make for an equally, if not more exciting matches. Why has it not been able to become a stronger rival to League of Legends? Is it Valve not tackling the Korean market or LoL being released 4 years sooner? So I kind of disagree that it's not a strong rival to LoL. It is in certain areas. Eastern Europe, Dota's fucking huge. Like, it's way bigger in Russia than League of Legends is, as far as I can tell. LoL's huge in China, but so is Dota. Southeast Asia, obviously, like Indonesia, Singapore, these countries are huge for Dota. So I would say maybe it's just, it depends market for market. It's also just a harder game than League of Legends. And so I think it's less attractive to a casual user base.
I will just say, as someone who's watched it for a long time, because I don't play the game, even I have trouble with some of the things they're doing and what's brilliant about it. Like, that's why I rely on.
I have no idea what's going on.
So one of the problems that game has, it's a brilliant feature, is in Dota, there's way less of a set meta. And there's way less of like, this role has to be this role and people can't switch it up. That really is a game where, to some degree, you can play a hero in your role that's mainly supposed to be for another role if you're good at it. It's actually got the ultimate flex capacity in that regard. So I think essentially that's bad if you want plebs to watch, because plebs, the reason League is perfect is all on rails. There's 5 set roles always, and there's a limited champion pool for those roles. You watch it a few times, you have a basic idea. And in the modern day, they made it actually they made it fucking Fisher Price League of Legends, Monty. You go to the Dragon, you go to the Herald, you go to the Dragon, you go to the Baron, you end the game after a team fight. Like, this isn't even the beautiful game it once was, guys. They've actually made it so fucking simplistic to me. So that's going to appeal to plebs in theory.
Yeah, the macro definitely has become less exciting as the years have gone on. But the micro has gotten better. That's not what I like most about the game, though. So it's kind of a
No, but
bummer.
you imagine the world where they never ever fucked with lane swaps, and that could have really developed
Yeah.
into like the chess match. Imagine when the skill level got to this level, Monty. That would be insane.
yeah.
The things you could do in the drafts, and it would have made the game. It would be like Ellis's dream, basically.
Yeah, it would have been really fun for sure. If you were in charge of creating an esports time capsule, what would you put inside and why? I suppose it depends when we made the time
I mean,
capsule.
you could sort of say I have created an esports time capsule called
Yeah.
Thorin with 3 O's on YouTube. There's like something like 3,000 videos on there, so no biggie, you know. So let me know who's second. And then basically, I've always said this. It's an egotistical thing to say, but it's just to illustrate a point, Monty. Here's what you do, right? Take the top 500 pieces of content by your favorite creator. If they don't have 500, they're immediately disqualified. If they have 500, spoiler, they only have 500. Now take that and compare it to the best 500 of mine, right? And even if you prefer them and you think they win, right, give them one. They get a 1-0 for the first 500. Now do the next 500. If they don't have any, then I win that one automatically. At the end, I win about 10-1. So pick whoever you like. There you go. So I think you can watch my channel. You can go back. You can see me talking 2014 and 2015 about fucking what I think about double lift and SOAS and all that shit. So in terms of a real answer, if you could actually put something in there, I mean, in the modern day, you'd probably do something like an NFT. You'd put something digital in, wouldn't you? You'd put in like the fucking Faker Z versus Z, the moves, clip or something. You know, you put in Flash, win the golden mouse or something. You put in like the iconic moments, surely.
Yep.
The Daigo fucking parry into mega combo. You put in all the classic moments, I'm pretty sure, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think that's basically all that you would do. And then, I mean, also archive like the most important games, right? Which we don't even have good archives of right now, sadly, because the developers just don't give a shit about preserving a lot of the history of their own games, unfortunately.
And also, I'd put in a note scribbled so they could tell there was sort of like an urgency behind it, and it would just say to whoever finds this capsule, if Riot Games is still active, stop them. Only you can stop them now. And then I'd send it as all like it's like the last letter wasn't fully written, and it's just like a bit of blood on the page. That's the only chance we've got. That's all I'm saying.
What would your dream matchup be for the World's qualifying series? The 4th seed LCS versus the 4th seed LEC for the world spot.
Okay.
I want Heretics in that spot.
It would be fun.
I think it'd be funny.
Already will make a fun series, right? Wouldn't he?
I think Heretics in that spot from LEC would be fun. LCS for my own amusement. Ooh, who would I want for my own amusement? Team Liquid or 100 Thieves, probably, just for my own entertainment. I think Heretics versus 100 Thieves would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be good League of Legends, guys, but it would be entertaining. How do you evaluate LoL? 1, good player on a bad team. 2, bad player on a good team. Feels like the team nature of the game makes things very results-oriented unless the player is exceptional to the point, it doesn't matter. So basically, it's just about how the real question here is how much effect can one player have on a game of League of Legends? And we've talked about this before. Riot has intentionally lowered that barrier. Like, it's not the same as it was in season 3 and season 4, especially in mid lane where you could get, Deathfire Grasp and have an insane advantage, or you could snowball vision through jungle and support to such a ridiculous degree that you would have really huge levels of disparity and dominance by players. They have essentially, like, the existence of Faker caused them to dial back individual carryability of the game. That's what happened. Faker was too good. So he was warping the entire scene too much. So they added, more sources of passive gold income for support players, et cetera, and tried to balance out the roles a little bit more. And took away a lot of crazy snowball items. So I do think it's possible to be a good player on a bad team, but you're still not going to have that big of an effect on the actual win-loss outcome because so much of it is based on team fighting right now. So much of the game is based on good team fighting. I think it's tough.
The problem is the obvious answer is the one you don't want to hear. It's just have a really good eye test.
Yeah.
So it's the reason why I double down on people like Upset a million times. I can just watch them play and go, it's fucking amazing. The problem with that is I understand the less you know about the game, the more you are relying on stats and seeing the score line and hearing what the casters say. So I would just actually say, I'll give you the cheat. The obvious cheat is just pick a really good analyst, LS, Dom, something like that, Monte, and then listen to what they say. They'll give you the angles, and usually these people will tell you their bias. Isn't that what we're here for? To be biased and give you the insight?
Fair enough. How do you overcome plateaus when trying to improve in a particular field? I've been attempting to climb the solo queue ladder in CS, but keep hitting a ceiling and falling back down. I think you have to be very deliberate and critical. So unfortunately, the way to improve on things is usually just unpleasant, getting your hands dirty and reviewing the material. It's objectively more fun to play another game of LoL and CS than it is to watch a VOD of your own play and be highly critical of your mistakes. But that is actually how you are going to fix a lot of your problems. Do you want to take notes after every game about all the things that you did wrong to reinforce them in your memory and improve? Do you want to go watch films of other good players or other people who are good in your field and figure out how you can emulate them or things you can take away? It's just a lot of grinding on the least fun parts. That's how you get better.
I'll just give two very simple pieces of advice. One, actually do, especially if it's a game that goes badly, do watch it back. If there's some way you can record it, watch it. Because here's the thing, you're going to cringe and you're going to say all that excuse and cope. Like, no, but I wouldn't have done. But it's just because, don't say any of that. You're the only one there. There's no one to give an excuse to. Understand brutally, yes, I fucked these things up, but don't feel bad about it. Just know right now I know some of the mistakes I'm making. Like basically, look for big macro tendencies, not like the micro. Look at things like, oh, I actually tend to get a bit too high for you in lane and push it a bit early, or oh, I go for kills that are just like 50-50 when I maybe had like the scaling pick or whatever. Then this is the other thing. Only try and work on one small thing at a time. Because that way you can keep that in the back of your mind. And if you're a jungler, for example, you can play a small vision. Or if you're a fucking support player, you can learn to just look at the minimap a little bit more. It's the same concept as working in the gym. The reason people don't go to the gym is because they want to go to the gym for 3 weeks, lose what took them 2 years to put on in weight, and be jacked with abs after 3 weeks. That's impossible. So as a result, what you have to do in the gym, the term is progressive overload. You start light, and then you make sure you do that. It's going to be hard even then. Then you progressively overload. After a week or two, you put a bit more on. You keep going. As it goes, you will adapt to it and you will meet the resistance level. It's the same concept with improving in games. But as I say, because this is a concept I took out of that book, The Inner Game of Tennis, don't try and do 50 things at once. That will just fuck you completely. Just apply one little thing at a time, and then over time, you'll just gradually improve.
Can you explain what happened with EasyHoon/Faker to someone who wasn't there? Yes, we can.
I mean, one, Azir. Two, yes. They actually did have a cracked out team, so they could. There even was some of that final boss shit where they were like, right, we'll see if we actually need to bring in Faker because EasyHoon can beat you. There even was some of that shit going on. And they were, at the time, if you remember, they were also fucking around with the junglers. I don't think that helped either. There was a lot of weird shenanigans back then.
The funny thing about the EasyHoon thing is people will look at Faker and say, if you watched Faker later, you would say Azir, first off, it's one of his most played, if not his most played champion of all time. I can actually just look at that real quick. I think it might be his most played champion of all time now. Let me just look. Yes, it is. And it's by a lot too. It's 134 games, and his next one is Rise at 67, and he has a 68.7% win rate on his ear. So you might say, like, holy shit, Faker's probably extremely good at his ear. He was really bad at his ear when he started out. EasyHoon was a much better Azir player, so that was a big part of it. And as you say, it was also kind of the meta game that was developing at that time. And also you have to remember that there was a big exodus of Korean talent at that time where a lot of the other best mid laners were no longer within the scene. So it was easier to have a less good mid laner. But Faker was slumping a little bit during that period. He came back, he bounced back and was exceptional again. But EasyHoon had a different skill set too. So maybe there was some stuff going on inside the team as well. I don't know.
And Coma was ruining esports history. Shout out. That's one
and
of my
Coma was ruining esports history. All right. Guys, we've been doing questions for a long time. There are some more questions left, but I'm going to call it after the next one. Yeah, and then we're going to do one more, and then we will end. Monty, do you agree that the reason Mercury and MonteCristo, I think that's supposed to say Mercedes, I'm going to guess it's Mercedes, and MonteCristo should end up together is because the power of love and good always triumphs over bad? And it says Haley is too young. I think it means heyday is too young. I'm assuming that these are the characters you're talking about. Love makes all the difference. We want a happy ending for him. No, that's not the point. That's not the point. I mean, this is why it's so outrageous that they have Mercedes getting back together at the end of these books. So first off, they were much, much younger when they were supposed to get married at the start of the series. She went and married his rival after he was put in prison. Like, no, he shouldn't be with her anymore. Like, she showed some pretty shitty judgment in this situation. And you really want him to get back together with a woman who married the guy who imprisoned him? Like, the point is that they needed to move on. Like, both of them needed to move on at that point in time. And if anything, Edmond Dantes should have found somebody. He should have just fucked off and found somebody who would make him happy with all of his riches and his good fortune after he broke out of prison. It wasn't about going back in time. The whole mistake that the Count of Monte Cristo makes is that he's trying to right the wrongs of the past, and ultimately it doesn't provide any joy for him, and he realizes it was a mistake. Imagine having all of the resources in the world and then being hell-bent on trying to get this revenge or reliving the past when you could do literally anything else with your existence, right? That's the point. And that's why it's so disappointing when films have him get back together with Mercedes, because it doesn't show the growth as a human being that he should have had. And that's the entire theme of the book, is that he is not actively growing, that he is stuck. And that's the breakthrough he makes at the end.
To me, the whole point of life and the journey of romance that I've experienced, and from my reading of fiction and stuff, is that there is no one. It depends on your capacity to make someone your one, if you know what I mean. So to me, in that scenario, I agree with you, Monty. They actually didn't even have that. The silly part about that story, if they ever wanted it to have a happy ending, is they should have had like 10 years of marriage and then she gets taken from him. It's like some Odysseus shit. Then you could do it. But in that scenario, it's like the equivalent of like your high school rival stealing your girl. Yeah. And then you go through a 30-year thing where you become godlike and you waste your time like Spider-Man coming back to that girl. Like, what are you doing, bro? Just go out into the world, get someone better.
Remember that he was just a sailor on a ship. He wasn't a captain. He was really young. And Mercedes was not shit talking Mercedes, but like, maybe you would have more opportunities at this point in time there, Edmond Dantes. Maybe you'd have a larger pool of people to perhaps have meaningful romantic relationships with, now that you've both grown up and matured, but also have unimaginable wealth. I don't know. I'm not sure what this is part of the same question, so this will be the last one. I don't know what this means. Thorin, what if the Dune series exists in the world of Dune? I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
I actually genuinely think, for real, he meant to say like a different thing at the end instead of Dune, and he fucked up and just wrote Dunes. But the problem is, because he doesn't put it, we can't guess. So I assume he probably was going to say some other fantasy world, which is probably really interesting.
Right.
But I can't answer that, can I?
I mean, I did like the first question, even though I think you got auto-corrected by your phone for this.
Here's what I'll say. I would just say this. Basically, I actually do think the sleeper that will awaken from me answering this, because I said it on this other show as well, but no one ever knows this, is the Sci-Fi Channel in the early 2000s did not only Dune, but they then did it where it also went into Dune Messiah, and then they did Children of Dune as well. They did a series, I think it's 3 parts in each, and it even has famous movie actors in and everything. James McAvoy's in it, etc. It's actually good. Now, look, the graphics aren't good, but if you give a shit about the graphics, I don't know what you're here for, mate. It's actually quite true to the themes and the sort of atmosphere of the novel. It's quite good. I would say go watch that if you're a fan of Dune, and you've seen the other ones. You've seen the Villeneuve one. You've seen the Lynch one. This is it. This is like an interesting take on it. I thought it was pretty cool. It was quite. Just watch it, basically. There you go. That's the part.
All right. I am going to ask one more question because I'm curious about this as well. After not following basketball for a long time, I tuned into the finals this year. What do you think of Denver's run? Why are people underestimating Jokic? His numbers are very good, and his passing and shooting look amazing for a center. Again, I'm not a basketball fan, so I mean, I casually watched the NBA and finals, and I enjoyed it. Obviously, I'm from Colorado, so it was fun for me to see them finally win a title, even though I've never been a Nuggets fan. And I watched the Jokic highlights, and I think his passing, what amazes me about him is just his spatial awareness. Like, he has like a 3D map of the court in his head, and he just knows where everybody is at all times and makes those insane passes. But I'm very casual, so I'm more interested in hearing your take on this, Thorin.
I mean, the thing is, I think it's underrated, but I also think, sadly, like everyone underrated, the fans of Jokic are going too far the other way and making him sound like the fucking GOAT already. So the real problems you have is this. I actually thought the best series they played was the Suns series, where even the other star players like Booker were going ham and Durant was there. That was pretty good. Like, that was some good basketball. The problem is the Lakers conference final. The Lakers should never even have been there. They just had a couple of players like overperform and they got a bit fluky. And unfortunately, LeBron played fairly shit. Anthony Davis was like 50-50. It just wasn't a very good match, basically. They got eaten up. And then in the finals, the Heat essentially did that thing where too many people were injured. They were relying on the Jimmy Butler guy to have epic clutch games, but he's not like a top 5 player in the league or anything. So the problem is it was one of those ones you get sometimes where, like, props to the Heat for making it there, but that should have been the Celtics. If that had been the Celtics against the Nuggets, that would be an all-time banger series. That could have been really epic. They're both deep teams, really good styles. And also, in the finals, I actually, if I wanted, could go and get this fucking DM, because I sent it to Legia, who also doesn't follow the NBA much, but he's a big fan of Jokic because he's Serbian. And he basically said to me before the finals, who's going to win the finals then if the Nuggets play the Heat? And I told him, well, first of all, the Nuggets have a home court advantage and they're the better team. And the big problem you have is this: the Jimmy Butler guy can't win 4 out of 7 games for you. And the Heat's whole thing is defense. But the problem is the Nuggets are just going to blow them off the floor. And if you just go and look, the Heat could never score to even the capacity of the amount of points that the Nuggets gave up in the regular season to their opponents, and they were still winning. So to me, it was too easy for the Nuggets in the finals, the problem. So the finals looked a bit shit, and the game did look too easy for Jokic. So I think that's the reason why people underrate it. And then also, I mean, it's just not American, is he? So some fans are just hating on him because he's European or whatever. I thought Jokic was mega. I thought it was an all right run. It was like an above average one, but it wasn't like one of the most memorable runs of all time. Like I said, they didn't really have that. Like, there wasn't really like a murderer's row of teams you play against. Like, some of the great teams of all time, if you go back in time, the Celtics and the Lakers, some of those runs they went on, like, they would be beating the guy who'd won the championship the last year in the conference final, and then the final they might play the other rival that's won the ring before. That's what makes the epic eras. You know, you want to have people who are like truly great teams. So as I say, I actually think the Celtics in the final would have been more of an epic final to go out on. Just was a bit, just ran out of steam in the finals, basically.
So yeah, it's weird because I read a lot of NBA journalism because I like the sports writing surrounding the NBA, and I like the way that people do written analysis and kind of follow the stories more than I actually like watching the games. I know that sounds strange. But that was a common take I've seen from sports writers has been that the Nuggets run was not, like you're saying, it was a little fluky because of the results that happened, and that really it's going to be about them being able to challenge for future titles. That's going to define what this win meant and how good Jokic can be, and if this is a core that can create some sort of dynastic run like the last Warriors run. So,
like, to me, there weren't a lot of truly great teams in this regular season. I thought there's a lot of teams also had injuries, and a lot of that shit happened, basically. So it was just an unlucky season in general, in my opinion. They were the best team, but it was an unlucky season.
Fair enough. All right. Well, guys, you can retype your questions. We got through almost all of them, but we're at 3.5 hours, so we're going to call it for this one. Nice long question period, catching up on some of them. We will see you guys for more Summoning Insight next week.